Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today we continue with the compilation videos which are aimed at people who are working or people who are driving or people who just have a heck of a lot of time and want something on in the background. Today we're jumping into some malicious compliance. Our first story today comes to us from Monkey Paw Wishes. Don't let the VP know we're over budget. Let's jump right in. This is a bit long, but several years ago, I worked in the purchasing department of a large semiconductor company in the US. Mostly, I handled all the non-production purchases and contracts, like office equipment, building management, travel contracts, that sort of stuff. But my biggest role was negotiating and approving temp staffing contracts for our US facilities. One day, a director, we'll call him Bill, sends me a request for $150,000 for temp workers at a small facility in the middle of nowhere, Florida. The news was that a couple of local businesses had closed, and he had this great idea to save the company money by moving some production down there and snatching up those now desperate workers on the cheap. It seemed like a bit of a dumb idea at the time, but it was clearly his pet project, and $150,000 was within his right to spend without additional approval. So I rubber stamped it and off he went. I hadn't had much interaction with Bill, but he was a pompous butt, so I was glad to get rid of him. Now, it's important to this story to understand that our company's finances were super tightly controlled. Not a bad thing, but if you wanted to spend $1 over your role's limit, you'd better have your supervisor's signature in triplicate. Directors like Bill could spend up to $250,000, VPs $500,000, and anything over $500,000 had to go all the way up to our CEO for approval. About 3 months later, the trouble starts when Bill suddenly turns back up asking for more money. Turns out, rural Florida doesn't have a lot of people with the skills to work in an industrial cleanroom, and the people who do don't come cheap. The money that was supposed to last a year is already gone, but Bill is certain that he just needs a little more time, and asks me to approve another $250,000 without telling our VP, his boss. I straight up refuse, since it's my literal job to stop this. But Bill, being God's gift to this company, throws an absolute fit. It got ugly, and long story short, my boss directly ordered me to approve Bill's money without escalating it. I got this all in writing, since it was sketchy as hell, and absolutely something I could get fired for. Finally, Bill's gone, and I don't have to see his smug, short, balding head anymore. Or so I thought. Having disrespected the great and powerful Bill, I was now the target of his displeasure. For the next 4 months, I get at least 3 emails or phone calls a day from him or his secretary about something they don't like about the building. The landscaping, the guy who brings the bottled water, the snack selection in the machine, the equipment in the sea-level gym, on and on. I'm getting openly berated for things that have nothing to do with me, but I'm stuck having to deal with them because my boss keeps caving to Bill's whims. And none of my paperwork is getting past his office either. I manage the purchasing for 12 facilities in the US and Europe, but if it needs his signature, I've got to personally bring it to him and stand there while he reviews it, or he's refusing to sign. It was somewhere between humiliating and infuriating, and I increasingly wished he'd fall down a staircase. After months of this, finally my chance for malicious compliance arrived. Shockingly, Bill hasn't managed to turn his pet project around, and what do you know, just needs $250,000 to get him through the year. I sign off, add the money to the purchase order, which now totals a cool $650,000, and shoot off an email to both him and my boss to remind them that this won't be shown to the VP. Then I print everything out, including the direct order not to show it to the VP, and march over to the CEO's office for him to sign. After all, it was now over the $500,000 required limit, and Bill never asked for him not to see it. All hell broke loose when they realized Bill's little project was $500,000 over budget. He didn't lose his job, but he refused to speak to me after that, which was exactly what I wanted. The Florida project was scrapped and was retasked to making basic electrical components. My boss was initially pissed, but once he realized my insistence on getting Bill's order in writing had probably saved both our butts, the whole thing went away. I was there for another year, and thankfully, Bill never made an appearance at my office ever again. OP, I don't understand how your boss still has a job. I mean, you're required to block orders over a certain limit unless a VP signs off, and your boss just decided to approve it and then hide it from the VP? That doesn't work. That should have been a career-ending move for your boss once it was found out. Do me a quick favor and take a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're actually not subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. This next story comes to us from Ancient Educator 76. Just sign this document that will dock you 11.5 hours. Let's jump right in. I'm a middle school teacher who speaks fluent Spanish, thanks to growing up in the West Valley. Go Suns! The fact that I'm bilingual has given me many opportunities, including one where a teacher in charge of an English language learner, ELL, important acronym for later, program gave me the opportunity to tutor students twice weekly, plus an additional 15 minutes per every hour worked as prep time. Okay, cool. So Mondays and Fridays I punch in 15 minutes before 2:20. During my 7th hour prep, then punch out at 3:30 when the kids left. No problem, right? Wrong. At the end of the year, I get an email saying I'm being docked 11.5 hours that were punched in before the end of the day. I was livid. They claimed I'm getting double paid, but I looked through everything I signed off on and didn't remember seeing any restrictions on when I was to punch in for those hours. We met in the office and the district representative had me sign this document, and she showed me the contract I signed. Nowhere did it specify when I was to punch in those hours, and I brought this to both people's attention who were present. But Federal Action Plan, FAP, office lady persisted. Just sign it, you can't get double paid. Enter Malicious Compliance. I signed quickly, this time using my middle name, which happens to be F this BS. It read, oh, F this BSP. I happen to know the person at District Office Savior, who will be reviewing this paperwork, and know that she'll either ask me what's up, or to have me re-sign an obvious non-signature. Like clockwork, I get a phone call on my 7th hour prep from District Office Savior. She asked why I signed like this and why I'm being docked. I explained my working with the 2 new students who don't speak any English all year, and even teaching them both English all year. I explained that no one said anything all year, and that I'd have to make the adjustments to get paid those hours the entire school year. She, District Office Savior, says, wait a minute, you were on your prep time, right? And you're bilingual? Do you have a cert? All answers were yes. My next paycheck was $3,500 more than my standard paycheck, coming out of the FAP lady's budget for federal action plans. I was very confused at first. It appears that I can punch in during my contract hours if it is on my scheduled prep, and because I have an ELL endorsement, I got this endorsement working with monolingual students in the West Valley, and my direct supervisor on campus doesn't. I get paid as an ELL leader on campus. Quite the stipend. So what was supposed to be a $345 deduction in pay for me turned out to be 10 times greater, as a deduction from their department paid directly to me. So looks like FAP lady's right. I can't get double paid, but it looks like I can get double quintuple paid. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this is the same OP that works in a fast food place to make ends meet because they're not getting paid enough as a teacher. So where are we going wrong here? Our teachers have a hard enough job as it is without getting this kind of crap from their own administration. Congrats on getting paid, and I think you owe your district office savior maybe a bottle of wine or something. This next story comes to us from Waldo06. Josh is on the grill until 11:55, so stop pestering him and do your station. Let's jump right in. Was reminded by another post about my time in fast food and how I maliciously complied. Anyways, back in college, I worked at an on-campus food place. Your basic burgers, fries, wraps, and small salads. My shift started at 11:25, doing wraps until 11:55 when Josh left. and I manned the grill and someone else did wraps. Now, Josh was a typical Josh, and it was his way or the highway. He'd get really mad when I'd throw more burgers on the grill or flip something while he was trying to chat up the dishwasher. I did this because he had no understanding of how much food was required to feed college kids during the small breaks between classes. Eventually, he complained enough that I was told, "Josh is on the grill until 11:55, so stop pestering him and do your station." So I did. I stopped touching the grill. The next shift, he leaves at 11:55, and I get on the grill and immediately throw down 40 frozen raw burger patties. 2 minutes later, the cashier starts yelling, "Where are the burgers?" Sorry, I just got on the grill, and Josh only had 5 in the warmer and 3 in the window. I know we always have about 100 students between 11:55 and 12:20, and they almost all get the burger meal, but I was told not to touch the grill. The burgers finish after a few minutes, and the next batch goes on, but the grill has cooled a little, so they take even longer. The line of kids waiting for food is longer than the line ordering, and management is pissed. I get chewed out for not being fast enough and just ask, "Do you want raw burgers or to talk to Josh?" It only took one more shift of this for them to realize that my meddling was actually what kept us afloat during the lunch rush. I'd often cook an entire grill of burgers while he was swinging and missing with the dishwasher. They eventually printed out a sheet of how many burgers and chicken etc. needed to be prepped for certain rush times, and gave Josh a very stern talking to about how to be a team player. Also, Josh sucked because he cooked all the burgers well done, like really well done. Then they'd sit in the warmer for another 5 to 15 minutes. He didn't know how to rotate either. So you were eating gosh darn hockey pucks. He ruined so much ground beef, he eventually got moved to salads and stock because he couldn't be trusted with anything that was fast-paced. Management saw how much faster everything moved when he wasn't joshing everything up. Okay, so what really got me here is, what kind of a food place schedules somebody to be done their shift right at the beginning of the lunch rush? That one I don't understand, and I think that can be chalked up to pretty crappy management. This next story comes to us from Dr. Amazing. I don't want to see your name on this list again. Let's jump right in. This story didn't personally happen to me, but it was told by someone I trust. I fully believe it to be true, but some details are slightly altered to protect privacy. A friend of mine is retired now, but back in the day, he did internal audits for a large bank. This story takes place about 30 years ago, when network computers were less common, and paperwork tended to be compiled manually. Bank managers had to submit various reports to their regional offices showing what their branches were up to, and the regional offices would occasionally send out auditors to go through the records and make sure everything was in compliance. One report that had to be filed monthly was a list of any employees who were in arrears on their own loans. Employees who had trouble managing their own credit were considered to be more at risk of stealing, fraud, or other financial crimes. So I guess the bank wanted to keep track of anyone who may fall into that category. My friend's team is doing an audit at a particular branch, going through the records and looking for any discrepancies. They find a big one. The manager of this branch has been behind on a number of loans he held with the bank, but had been leaving his own name off the report. More records are pulled, and they start looking at everything this guy has ever filed and comparing it to other records. The manager had started doing everything correctly, including himself on the report fairly regularly. At a point about 10 years previous, it suddenly stops, despite the spotty loan repayment continuing for years. Bosses of bosses are called. It's looking like they may have stumbled on years of falsified records and possibly more serious fraud. The manager is definitely getting fired, and depending on what else they find, looking at some serious criminal charges. Finally, they call the manager in to show what they found and ask for an explanation. The manager produces a letter from someone higher up in the bank. Basically, when he started, the manager was just a little too free with his spending and didn't make his monthly loan payments a top priority. His boss wrote a letter saying that having the manager of a bank branch at the top of a list of unpaid loans was an embarrassment. If he wanted to keep his job, he better make sure that his name never appeared on that report again. He was supposed to sort out his financial affairs, but the manager said he interpreted the instruction literally and simply stopped including his own name. It took years before anyone noticed. In the end, the investigation found no other signs of record tampering or financial crime. No one really believed that he actually thought what he was doing was allowed, but the whole thing was just ambiguous enough to give plausible deniability. By the point everything was discovered, the manager had his finances in good order, and he was pretty close to retirement. The whole thing was just sort of waved away as being more trouble than it was worth to deal with, and the manager didn't see any real repercussions. Is that like back in school when my parents told me they didn't want me bringing home any more report cards that had really bad grades on them? So I just stopped bringing home the report cards? I mean, yes, it spectacularly backfired on me, but for the time, it was what they wanted. This next story comes to us from Anarchy Palindrome. Love it. Sorry, I'm not PC manufacturer support. Please stop calling. Let's jump right in. To start off, this isn't my story, but a friend of a friend's. I'm telling it as I remember it, so I don't have specific details, but I'll provide as much as I can. About 15 years ago, a relatively large PC manufacturer, who I will not name for the sake of protecting identities, offered Windows OS support in addition to hardware support for their PCs. Well, in the state of Utah at the time, the predominant area code for phone numbers started 801. About 2 to 3 times a month, someone would somehow transpose the 1-800 portion of the support line and punch in 1-801 instead. This friend's phone number was identical to theirs, the difference being the toll-free area code versus the local area code. 99% of the time he'd tell them, yeah, you need to dial the 800 number, you dialed 801. They'd understand, apologize, and hang up. Well, one older guy who hated himself, humanity, the neighbor's dog, Wednesdays, etc., called him and rather than accepting his error, just pressed redial on his phone. Each time he called, he would become more agitated and escalated with insults, general douchebaggery, and demanding help with his operating system. Finally, after a few calls, the friend had enough, recognized the number calling through, and answered, "Hi, PC manufacturer support, how may I assist you?" Yeah, first of all, some jackbutt kept hanging up on me and wouldn't fix my computer. I want him fired. Oh, certainly. I'll personally make sure he does not work for PC manufacturer as soon as this call is completed. What can I assist you with today? The old man screamed through the phone. Side note, it's worth mentioning, this friend of a friend was a PC hobbyist and knew his way around PCs quite well. He just didn't want to do customer service for the company for free. But in this moment, he just snapped. The troubleshooting steps I'm about to list below should never be performed by anyone. Okay, so I know what this issue is, and there is a really easy way to resolve this. First things first, I need you to navigate to My Computer. Okay, now you should see something in there that says Local Disk, and in parenthesis, a capitalized C. Please click on that. Once that loads up, you'll want to locate a folder labeled Windows, and inside that folder, open another one labeled System32. Excellent. Now, this is a known issue that happens sometimes. Do you see anything labeled kernel in there? You do? Okay, so if you have too many of those, it will slow down your computer. Just select all of those and delete them. It may prompt you for an administrator password. That's just your normal password to log into your computer. Okay, those are all gone? Perfect. Now please restart your PC. Click. He immediately turned off his cell phone and left it off for about 6 hours. When he turned it back on, he had about 15 minutes of voicemails to listen to, and I've been told they were quite humorous, a bit graphic, and a couple got racist. If you read this far, thanks. If not, that's cool too. Have the day you deserve. OP, your friend just did what everybody working tech support wants to do when they get a customer like that, but they can't do it because they might lose their job. In the end, I'd say that customer got exactly what they deserved. This next story comes to us from Sriwar, Boiler Room Office Space. Let's jump right in. This happened in former Yugoslavia in the 80s. It was still a communist country, but by then they started allowing for some privately owned companies limited in size. My brother was working for one such company, which made high-end custom AC systems. And that's how I know about this story. As this was a novel concept at the time, office space was almost non-existent. You had this huge state-owned company who had their own buildings with everything they needed, including office space, and outside of that, there was never need and nothing was built with that in mind. So you really needed to think outside the box for this one. And that brings us neatly to the second peculiarity of life in former Yugoslavia, apartment buildings. To keep this short, at some point before, a whole bunch of them were made, basically a whole new part of the city, and all of them had this huge space in the ground floor, first floor, that was planned to be a boiler room, which was later abandoned in favor of one big heating plant to which all the buildings in that area were connected to. As you can see where this is going, the owner of the fledgling company approached the apartment building representatives and asked them to rent the space intended for non-existent heating systems. Now, these guys in this particular building were retired military officers, so a little bit arrogant and not big on asking questions. They had no idea what was going on, other than some guy was willing to give them money to rent part of the building that was never used. Not much money, but basically free money for them. So they signed a standard renting contract, which is very important for later. Owner converted the boiler room to 2-floor office with all facilities, and that was that for a while. One point about this guy, he didn't like to rent, so after a while, when businesses started to pick up, he started building a new factory that included much needed office space. When this was finished and he was ready to move, he again approached apartment building representatives with a proposal to pay him some of the costs of remodeling. They could now rent for way higher prices, as office space was by then in high demand. And for what he was asking, they would be in the clear in less than a year, and after that, profit. But as I said, former military officers, a bit arrogant, used to getting their way, they thought about it and said, no, you are moving out, and we are going to get that anyways and for free. Owner said, okay, no problem. Gathered around all of his employees and said, anything you need from former office, feel free to take. Electric plugs, toilet bowls, doors, anything that could be dismantled could be taken. After that, he brought a small excavator, drove it in, and started tearing the place clean. By then, building representatives are running and screaming bloody murder, threatening to call police, militia then, legal actions, everything and anything. Owner calmly takes out the standard renting contract, with highlighted premises to be returned to the original state after renting period. Now, there is something poetic about a bunch of entitled, arrogant bastards being screwed and knowing they can't do anything about it. My brother says it was glorious. I wish I was there to see it. Also, I'm happy to say that company managed to survive the Balkan Wars of the 90s and is still going strong to this day. Do you think the arrogant owner boiled over when they realized the renters were smarter than them? Do you think they had steam coming out of their ears? It sounds like the situation got a little heated, but in the end, nobody had a meltdown and the renters came out on top. This next story comes to us from Dr. Amazing. You're sure you want that many pennies? Let's jump right in. Years and years ago, I worked as a bank teller. 90% of my job was just cashing checks and being a living ATM. One day, this guy comes in and says he needs a lot of pennies. This was back when pennies were still in use. See, he's doing the classic pay for something with an inconvenient amount of loose change bit, and he needs a ridiculous amount of pennies. He's super excited to explain how this local business screwed him over. I won't bore you with the details, but it's pretty clear even in his telling that it was perfectly fair he was being charged this money. He's practically giggling as he explains how inconvenient it will be for the people he's paying. But here's the thing, maybe this works down in the States, but in Canada, there is a very reasonable limit on how much you can pay with change. The payee is allowed to reject any loose change payment over a certain amount. Thinking I might be able to save everyone involved a bunch of hassle, myself included, I explained this to my customer. The guy isn't having it. Just keep saying pennies are money, so he's allowed to do it. and I better give him his pennies. At this point, I figure it's not really my problem what he wants to do with his money, and I get to work. He wants a few $100s in pennies. That might not sound like a lot, but it's like 300 pounds. It's so many pennies that I have to tell him we don't actually have enough on hand. We have to make a special order for him. There's a small fee, but he doesn't care. A few days later, he happily loads up boxes and boxes of pennies and leaves. A week later, he's back. Only now, he's dragging in a hockey bag of loose pennies. I guess he spent some time opening all the rolls just to make it harder. As expected, the business owner simply refused to accept the payment, so he'd like to deposit this bag of pennies back in his account, and he'll bring the rest in later. Had to tell him we only took rolled coins, and he'd have to do that first. I'm not sure when Coinstar came out, but my small town definitely didn't have one. I missed his return, but I heard he eventually came back after going through the trouble of re-rolling all his money. A lot of trouble to get it right back to where he started. If only he had listened. Ah yes, he was blinded by the thought of malicious revenge, and he was rewarded with instant karma. Okay, let's do some calculations here. So 1 penny weighs about 2.35 grams, therefore 300 pounds is $579 Canadian. Now, I'm Canadian and I've heard that there's restrictions on how many coins you can use to pay for something, but I didn't know what that restriction was, so I looked it up. It turns out it's only 25 cents if the denomination is 1 cent. It's $5 if the denomination is 5 cents. It's $10 if the denomination is 10 cents or greater but less than $1. And it's $25 if the denomination is $1. And finally, because we have $2 coins here, it's $40 if the denomination is $2 or greater but does not exceed $10. So now you know, and knowing's half the battle. This next story comes to us from Fatal Deadlock. Extended warranty claim requires repair estimate. Let's jump right in. I used my credit card and bought an electric skateboard in fall of 2018 for $279 on Amazon. Not the best timing, but I was replacing a DIY unit that I built myself that was falling apart. Being in the Midwest United States, I got only a few weeks use out of it before the weather was too poor to ride it. Spring came along and for whatever reason, the battery would not charge. The skateboard only had a 3-month manufacturer warranty, and it spent most of that warranty period sitting in the closet due to miserable Midwest winter weather. Manufacturer warranty has now expired. It has been 5 months since purchase. But wait, my credit card has a feature where they will double the factory warranty on any product purchased with the card. Skateboard is only 5 months old, still within the credit card's 6 months extended warranty coverage. Sweet, let's file a claim. Claim is filed. I am fully expecting them to just replace the skateboard. I get a response. They require a repair estimate before they will process the claim. Okay, fine, let's do this. I reached out to the manufacturer. I had already opened up the skateboard and taken multiple voltage measurements, so their tech support quickly moved beyond, "Are you sure it's plugged in correctly?" and "What lights do you see?" They tell me it could be one of two things. It could be the battery or the circuit board that needs to be replaced. They give me a price for each. But that's not a repair estimate, that's a parts list. I had used many appliance repair companies and plumbers, and most of the time their invoice or repair estimate is just a generic piece of paper with their name, the word repair, and a price. Super lazy. And yet, that is good enough to get reimbursed for home warranty claims. I figure that I could write a repair estimate, and I am certainly qualified to repair this. I have a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. If I am going to do the repair, I should be compensated for my work. So I wrote an itemized estimate for myself to do the repair. It went as follows. Such and such electronic repair. My home address, my cell phone number, made up invoice number, today's date. Replacement battery $79. Replacement circuit board $69. Labor, remove damaged components, install new, $50. Diagnostic fee, $25. Tax, $12.27. Total, $235.27. Quote valid for 30 days, estimate only. Well, $235.27 is less than $279. So the extended warranty company approved the invoice without hesitation. I complied with the repair estimate required and got paid $87.27 to fix my own skateboard. And now I have a working electric skateboard that has given zero problems since my repair. The interesting thing to me here was that there was just a 3-month warranty on this from the factory. Here in Canada, most things that you get come with a manufacturer 1-year warranty. I believe in Europe it's 2 years, and in some places it's being extended to 3 years, which is pretty crazy. Great work, OP, on getting paid to do that repair yourself though. That was awesome. This next story comes to us from Celestine Noxa. Want me to vacuum your hand? Okay, let's jump right in. This happened when I was a kid, maybe 11 or 12 years old. We had a black lab puppy named Ralph. At first, we kept him inside, but once he got bigger and more destructive, they ended up putting him outside to be an outside dog. This is the country in the south, so while it's not the safest for pets, it's not unusual in this area. One day, while he was still an inside puppy, Ralph got a hold of some kind of paper, I forget what kind, but something like paper towels or toilet paper. Whatever it was, he shredded it all over the living room carpet. My stepdad was pretty angry about it, but puppy gonna puppy, right? Since technically Ralph was my puppy, he was a gift to me for Christmas, but they named him and he was really their dog, my stepdad insisted I vacuum up the shredded paper. This is a story for another subreddit, but let's just say my whole family is cursed when it comes to vacuum cleaners. I take out the vacuum, plug it in, turn it on, and start running it over the shredded paper. It's definitely on, but I can tell after just a few swipes that it's not picking up anything. I turn it off and tell my stepdad, who grumbles and tells me to turn it back on and try again while he watches. I do. It's still not picking anything up. He tells me to tilt it back so he can see what the mechanism is doing while it's on. I do. That apparently isn't enough. The next thing my stepdad does is place his hand flat on the carpet and he tells me, a 12-year-old, to run the vacuum over his hand so he can feel whether it's sucking or not. I'm 12, but I'm pretty sure this is a bad idea. Are you sure? Yeah, go on. I'm still sure this is a bad idea, but I'm 12, and he's my stepdad, and he's a jerk most of the time anyway. So I mentally shrug and proceed to do what he told me to do. Immediately he shouts and pulls back, and I can already see there's blood on his hand. He's cursing and holding his hand, and obviously in a lot of pain. 3 of his fingers start swelling and turning purple almost instantly, and he's bleeding from at least 2 of them. He ends up losing 2 of the fingernails. Later, my mom came home from work and I ran outside to tell her the story first, to make sure she knew it was not my fault. To his credit, this was one of the very rare times my stepdad admitted it was his own fault, and I was just doing what he told me to. He was more than a jerk, he was abusive in basically every way it's possible to be abusive, so losing 2 fingernails painfully is the least of what he deserved. I'm guessing Dad didn't use the vacuum very often because if he did, he would have known that there was a beater bar underneath that vacuum, and that regardless of whether the vacuum was sucking or not, that beater bar would be spinning very quickly, and that's not made to stick human flesh into. This next story comes to us from Kothor. Sproing goes the shocks. Let's jump right in. So once upon a year, I used to work for a large hardware chain that had aprons that beautifully matched my pumpkin-esque figure. I worked in a busy flooring department and could share many a story, but the most delightful came from people overestimating the abilities of their vehicles. Pros would come in with appropriate vehicles and expectations, while DIYers would occasionally come in with a disdain for aproned associates. Our location had seen enough such DIYers come through that we had a cover your butt form we developed. Well, one fine day, a man comes in a rush and demanded the promptest of service, was annoyed at any and all project advice, and took offense when we'd offer delivery service. He'd chosen a nice slate tile and wanted a pallet for his house. We did up the sale and brought the pallet to the drive-up area. He pulled up in his new Ford F-150. No reinforced trailer, just the truck. That truck can carry roughly 2,000 pounds, give or take. The pallet was about 3,800 pounds. I told him that we would need to break open the pallet, he could take half right away, and the other half later. The man went ballistic. They could hear him back in lighting. After some back and forth, and a few other managers coming by and strongly advising him that his truck could not take the pallet, he was screaming and foaming at the mouth. I shrugged, grabbed the form, discussed the portion saying he was ignoring our advice and he absolves our company and its employees of any responsibility for the outcomes. He signs it, settles down, and our forklift starts to bring the pallet down on this poor truck. Once the shocks had bottomed out, I called for the forklift operator to stop, showed the guy, the operator confirmed only half of the load weight had been transferred, and we gave him a final chance to reconsider. No such luck. I indicated for the forklift driver to continue, and there was no immediate catastrophic failure. The customer thinks we're all morons, while nearly everyone in the store, including many a chuckling pro customer, is hanging out at the doors watching. The guy gets in his truck, calling out a thanks to us expletive morons, then drives a whole 6 feet before blam, shocks blew, and his rear axle bent in a bit. He came out screaming at us, while I held the paper and pointed up at the security camera that looked over the area. He declined my offer to call a tow truck. OP, what you've learned and what a lot of people learn in retail is that ignorance can be educated, crazy can be medicated, but there's just no cure for stupid. This next story comes to us from NoPush5003. Oh, you mean right now? Okay, let's jump right in. Let me, 25 male, introduce you to the key players in this story. First, we have my dog. She is a service animal and as a result is very well trained. Up next, my annoying and petty neighbors. I live in a small duplex with an even smaller front yard that isn't fenced in. The only thing separating the duplex and the neighbor's house is a very narrow driveway. It's important to note that when I refer to the neighbors, I am not referring to the residents of the connecting unit of the duplex, but the owners of the house a driveway over. My neighbors have a history of annoying behavior. For starters, they are extremely socially awkward. They watch over us like hawks, have never been able to hold a conversation with us despite us being friendly and trying, and are some of the most passive-aggressive people on earth. Maybe it's because we're college-aged and they have something against the Utes, but whatever the reason, they have it out for us. The neighbors have called our landlords to tell them that we are partying at all hours of the night. The family, with infants in the connecting unit, the unit that shares a wall with us, have never once complained. When the landlord asked them about these complaints, they always denied it. For reference, aside from me, none of the other residents of the house even drink. I drink on occasion, once every few months, but never at the house out of respect for the sober people. The neighbors called the city over the course of several months and got one side of the street turned into a no parking zone because we have 4 cars in total, one for each person that lives in our unit, and have to park on the street. This obstructed their view. As a result, we started parking in front of their house on the legal side of the street. One day, while we were gone, they moved their truck from their driveway that has ample parking to the street to block us from parking there. Their truck didn't move for 6 months. Anytime my dog goes number 2 in the yard and it sits for more than a few hours, they call the landlord to report it. Because of my disability, I can't always get to it immediately. My landlord understands this and understands how the neighbors are. So, she had stopped saying anything aside from laughing with me about how ridiculous and annoying these people are. This is just a short list of my grievances with our neighbors. I could go on, but by now, you get the point. Well, yesterday morning, I let my dog out as per usual. I was in my underwear, which are thin and tight-fitting, as I had just rolled out of bed. Let's just say that they don't hide much of anything. I'm standing in the doorway where my neighbor's house is blocked from my view. As my dog is sniffing around in our yard, I look down at my phone. A few seconds later, I hear our neighbor, the wife, shout, "No, don't do that here. Get out of our yard, stop that," in a very panicked voice. Turns out, they were all sitting outside. By the time the neighbor had shouted, it was too late to call my dog back over. She was in the process of gifting them a big present. I shout, "Hey, I'm sorry about that. I'll come get it, give me a minute," and call my dog back inside. Dead silence. About 15 seconds go by. I was on my way to my room to throw some pants and a shirt on when I hear a muffled shout from the husband, "Come pick this up right now." I chuckled to myself and shouted, "Okay," with a huge grin on my face. I knew what I had to do. I dropped the pants that I had grabbed. I turned right around, picked up a doggy bag by the door, and made my way out of the door and into view of the husband, who is standing cross-armed near the pile of poop with a rude expression and posture, the wife and the daughter. Watching the look of anger turn into shock was so satisfying. He was truly speechless, as was the rest of the family. I'm just happy to have a story I can finally share on here. I also think the family is LDS Mormon, so that is probably the most graphic display of private bits they have ever seen, at least in the non-marital sense. OP, you really need to check with your city, because if a vehicle hasn't moved for over 6 months and it's parked on city property, you can likely get it towed for being abandoned. I do have to somewhat look at this from the other side though, because if OP's sending their dog out to go to the washroom and it's not leashed or attached to anything, then that's kinda OP's problem that it's gone and crapped in somebody else's lawn. Unless you have a completely enclosed area outside that your dog can go to the washroom in, it should be leashed or attached to something. This next story comes to us from Snort Giggles. You want to make things fair? I'll show you fair. Let's jump right in. A couple of weeks ago, my kids and their neighbors decided to have a bake sale. We live in a tourist area with high foot traffic, and the kids make a killing. I tell the kids I ought to charge them for the labor. I said I'd help bake, and ingredients, so they learn the concept of net gains. But instead, I'll donate to their cause, and just to bring me back the money I lent them to make change. I love seeing the kids be entrepreneurial, work so hard, and get so excited at their success. After a couple of hours, the neighbor's son decides he's bored and wants to go home. So he tells my kid, "When you're done, come by and deliver half the money." Mine says, "Hey, that's not fair. If you're leaving, we should split the money now." Mind you, the bulk of their sales was my baking. Neighbor kid gets super pissed, but mine sticks to their guns. They split the money, and the kid leaves in a huff. Mine comes in a few hours later, having lugged home all the gear and cleaned up, annoyed that the neighbor kid got annoyed at them. Then I get a knock on the door. It's the neighbor's mom, with the kid who is still pouting. Mom's holding a receipt. Mom explains that they purchased a bunch of stuff for the bake sale. It cost a lot of money, and it's not fair that my kid is making money off their stuff, and that they should be compensated for what they purchased. The receipt lists a bunch of items I immediately see they didn't use, like 2 boxes of cereal when they used 1, napkins that I'd ended up providing, but whatever. And never mind that her son went home early and left mine to clean up. And never mind that I'd been churning out batches of cookies all morning. I'm irked they've taken what was a fun, cheerful day of kids making money hand over fist and shown up at my door making me engage in a super awkward conversation because they assume their kid can't be wrong. So I say, of course, and fetch my receipts. I sit down and, in front of them and out loud, calculate the cost of lemonade and cups used. I calculate the cost of flour, sugar, chocolate chips, vanilla, and butter per batch of cookies, multiplied by the number of batches made. I toss in the baking soda for free, so generous. I even subtract the value of leftover cookies. Did I mention I made a lot of cookies? The neighbor kid has to fork over $23. They got pretty quiet all of a sudden. I thanked the lady for making sure things were fair, and offered her a plate of cookies to take home. She declined. The end. So this is a parent that wasn't taking the whole situation into consideration, because if they did, they would have realized they weren't the only people there. They weren't the only people that supplied items to this sale. It does sound like the apple isn't falling far from the tree though, because the kid still wanted half of everything, even though they were leaving partway through. That kinda rings true with exactly what the parent was trying to do in this case as well. OP, one more thing to consider though, now that you've made your point, if your kid ever tries to sell anything outside of your house again, make sure you're properly permitted, because that neighbor could very likely hold a grudge, and they might want to do anything possible to get you shut down. This next story comes to us from 5 Frog Margin. Why is there pizza sauce smeared all over the walls? The bosses wondered to themselves. Let's jump right in. 20 years back, I worked on a tugboat sailing the Great Lakes. This was a really crappy company, and they'd more or less exhausted very available mariner living on the Great Lakes, so nobody on the lakes would even apply to work there anymore. As a result, I, Tennessee Kentucky River Trash deckhand, got hired on. From the get-go, it was an uphill battle. My hard work ethic and easygoing nature were overshadowed by my southern accent and inexperience with big cities. Hick was one of the nicer terms thrown my way in those 6 months. But the money was amazing, and I learned to eat plenty of crap as I really wanted the job. After about 4 to 5 months, I began to get a bigger picture of the dynamic and was vastly more confident in my abilities. At this point, I was unconsciously doing most, if not all, of the deckhand's work on board. One way I got screwed was galley kitchen cleanup. One of the deckhands got galley cleanup in the morning, one got it at night. Naturally, as the FNG, effing new guy, I always seemed to get stuck with nighttime galley cleanup. AM cleanup was a little more than tossing dishes in the washer and making coffee. Nighttime cleanup was the culmination of an entire day's worth of buildup. Easily 45 to 60 minutes worth of work. Enter the annual shipyard period, and this is where our tale begins. We pulled into Sturgeon Bay, population 8,900, around dusk, as we had a 3-week shipyard period scheduled. Now, this company was death on drinking, instant firing. Of course, because we all had no loading or unloading the next day, we all went out to some local bar that night. My years of coal barge experience taught me grab a few drinks, then get back to the boat. We got a job in a few hours. So after a half dozen buds, I walked back to the boat to go to sleep. Since I was a nice guy, always trying to help out my crew no matter what they do to me, I decided to cook them a couple pizzas. I tossed a couple tombstones in the oven, set cook, smoked a butt or two, then pulled them out. I placed them on the counter with a note, pizzas on the stove, clean up your mess, put dishes in washer when you're done. Maybe it was the demanding tone in my orders, but my note 100% set them off. I woke up to literally pizza smeared across every cabinet and a rough FU in pizza font on the whiteboard. I woke up at 0600 to this mess. Since it was morning cleanup, I figured it was not my responsibility. I'd been getting up at 0600 1 hour before the crew and making coffee for 2 months, and I suspect they were used to it. This time, the bigwigs from the office were in town, shipyard remember, and had let the captain know they would be on board in the AM. And so they were. I was in the galley, sipping my coffee, when 3 of the bigwigs came down the stairs. I politely asked if anyone wanted coffee. They all said yes, former sailors, and sat in the galley staring at the Pizza Picasso artwork decorating the bulkheads, walls, waiting for the captain apparently. After 10 to 15 minutes, the captain came down. He had that been drinking all night vibe to him and was promptly horrified at the state of the galley. Of course, he immediately tried to show off by raging against me and the state of the galley. I reminded him that I was night cleanup, not AM cleanup. The more he tried to pin this on me, the worse he looked. It finally culminated in him trying to hammer me. I know you have night cleanup, but couldn't you have at least wiped down the cabinets? I'd had an hour to practice my answer. When we left Toledo last week and I asked you for help cleaning the galley after the mess the longshoremen left, you told me I volunteered for night cleanup, so it's my job, period. Well, now it's AM cleanup, and other deckhand has cleanup. He doubled down and ordered me to clean the galley to save face, but it was just digging a deeper hole. Best of all, my shipmates couldn't resist bragging about the stupid drunk crap they'd done that night. I called the company's 1-800 number, used a variety of accents, and complained about what they'd been doing in Sturgeon Bay. Some of the complaints I made lifted straight from their stories from that night. 1. Threw their empties at the bar's Billy Bassmouth trophy. 2. Tried to take down 2 of the bar's 5 mounted deer heads. 3. Walked behind the bar to grab a bottle of Jägermeister to pour free shots for everyone. 4. After getting kicked out, they weren't, kicking the side of a pickup parked in front. 5. Putting empties in several mailboxes between the bar and the shipyard. 6. Knocking a bass-shaped mailbox off of its mount. All of which they bragged about loudly. Long story short, 1 officer and a deckhand got fired. The captain had Sturgeon Bay hanging over his head as long as I worked there, 7 years. And the office never effed with me, not once. Some people really think they're in a position of power and can tell other people what to do with absolutely no consequences. They think that their status or their rank equals dominance over other people, that they're above other people. This can even cloud their ability to see reason, which is what we had in this case here. The last part I want to touch on in this one though is who desecrates pizza? I mean, come on, it's pizza. This next story comes to us from Wombat929. Nope, the boss isn't here. Mini malicious compliance in the box office. Let's jump right in. When I was in high school mid-90s, I worked at a movie theater. When I was working box office, it was also my job to answer the phone. Manager managed multiple branches of the theater, so he often left during the day. One day, regional manager who was good friends with manager called and I said I'm not sure if manager was there. I checked and manager was in, so I transferred the call. After a few minutes, manager transferred regional manager back to me so he could scold me. At the time, it felt like yelling, but I was a timid teen. That I should always know if my manager is in or not. As an adult, I now recognize that 1. Manager should have corrected this, rather than having a corporate bigwig scold a teenager. 2. I should have been trained to see if he's available, so I could take a message if he wasn't. But at the time, I was just really irritated to get scolded by regional manager over something I couldn't control. So from then on, whenever regional manager called, he would say, "Hi OP, is manager in?" He'd really hit that question, highlighting that I should know. I think he only did this to me as it seemed like his entire impression of me was as a dumb kid who didn't know if the manager was there. So with just a hint of goody two-shoes maliciousness, unless I was absolutely sure that the manager was there, I usually told regional manager that manager had stepped out and asked to take a message. It often turned out that manager was there when regional manager called, so I could have connected them. But since I'd been told how dire it was to be uncertain, I never again expressed any doubt about whether manager was in or not. I'd like to say that the story had some kind of gratifying button, but my malicious compliance mainly resulted in regional manager being slightly inconvenienced, and manager having to return calls he could have just taken. They both got fired sometime later in a midnight sweep that was rumored to be embezzlement related, but who knows if that's the truth? I sure don't. In retrospect, I realize now that regional manager taught me the difference between Gnostic and agnostic. I was usually agnostic on the issue of my manager's presence upstairs. You know, working in a theater, it can be understandable that you wouldn't know whether your manager is in the building or not. There's a lot of people moving around in a place like that, and unless it's your job to actually know that, well, you just won't know that. So yes, OP should have been better trained. Anytime they got a call asking where the manager was, they should have said, "Let me check for you," and put them on hold for a moment to go see if the manager was there. Obviously, that's not how OP was trained, but that shouldn't fall back on OP, that should fall back on the manager themselves. Now, in the comment section for this one, there was a hilarious answer here that they say OP should have used. It's from the user CoderJoe1, and it says, "The correct answer is, yes, he's here, but he skipped his bran muffin this morning after having an argument with his wife about what her mother said yesterday and is currently contemplating his existence in the men's room. Second stall from the end, the one with the better graffiti and the door that doesn't close exactly right unless you lift it as you close it. Personally, I think his mother-in-law is wrong when she said working as a movie theater manager is wasting his life. Would you like to leave a message for him?" This next story comes to us from Silas Breakdown. "My 6-step protest of the stupid new company shirts." Let's jump right in. I, 21 male, work at a grocery store. Started as a courtesy clerk or bag boy for the uncultured, but recently I've been training to be a checker. Yesterday I was scheduled as courtesy clerk, and I assumed it was going to be a normal day. Several months ago, the dress code was relaxed to a significant degree. Before, we had to wear one of a few different company issue shirts. However, mid-December, we were told that we could now wear whatever we want within reason. Apparently, the store director had a different definition of within reason than the rest of us. So I started wearing my favorite shirts, normally the one from RWBY or one with Transformers on it. Yesterday, I wore the Transformers shirt. Upon arrival, everyone was wearing the same blue shirt advertising the store's new mobile game. You know how some stores have promotions where you get a few tickets with every purchase that you can redeem for a chance to win prizes? Well, someone at corporate decided to do that, but in mobile game form. And honestly, I think the shirts are kinda stupid. From here on, I will call them the FU shirt. I was told that all checkers had to wear them, but my manager, I'll call her Patty, said she'd check with the store director, Greg, if that applied to courtesy clerks too. While Patty checked on that, I started my floor sweep. Now, about Greg, he's legitimately a great boss. There seems to be a recurring pattern with these stories where the boss has no idea how things actually work and is just a penny pincher or whatever. Greg defies all stereotypes. He helps out all over the store. He's even been known to help bag groceries if things get nuts, though that hasn't happened in quite some time. He's also the one who showed me how to snake a toilet, very hands-on. One time, he worked in the bakery for a month straight until more staff were hired. Honestly, as my first boss, he's kinda setting up all my future bosses for failure. All this to say, I wasn't trying to get back at him for anything. I was just trying to have some harmless fun, and protest a rule I think is stupid. So anyways, turns out all front-end staff have to wear the FU shirts. Fine. I spent the floor sweep coming up with ideas to peacefully and playfully protest. Malicious compliance number 1. I wore the FU shirt as a headband. It wasn't long enough to tie, so I taped it down. Patty saw me like that, smiled, and told me I probably had to wear it. Malicious compliance number 2. I put the FU shirt on in the bathroom, and then put the Transformers shirt on over it, making sure you could see the FU sleeves. That one got caught by Greg, who told me the FU shirt needs to be over. Malicious compliance number 3. This one was my favorite, and I think it lasted the longest. I called it the tape cape. I put on the Transformer shirt and then draped the FU shirt sleeves over my shoulders and taped them into place. Eventually, I got the idea to use a pride pin to save a piece of tape, but I'm still calling it the tape cape because it rhymes and I love it. Took Patty quite a while before she noticed both shirts are blue and she laughed. She didn't tell me to change it or anything. Eventually, Greg saw me and told me to wear it right. His mistake was not defining right. Malicious compliance number 4. I put the Transformer shirt away and actually started wearing the FU shirt. Head in the head hole and arms in the armholes, just inside out is all. This one might have lasted longer than the tape cape, but I wasn't keeping track. Greg didn't notice at first, but when he did, he just said my name in a disappointed tone. So I figured it was time to change tactics. Malicious compliance number 5. Backwards. That's all, just backwards. Greg came up to give me my 3-year pin and told me I almost had it right. Giving me the pin was a mistake though, because I had one more trick up my unwanted sleeve. Malicious compliance number 6. You may be thinking I've exhausted my options at this point, I have to wear the FU shirt the proper way now, don't I? Yes, I do. But no one told me I couldn't wear a cape. Yep, I did a reverse of the tape cape, so the Transformer shirt was covering the graphic with inexcusable puns on the back. I used the pride pin and the 3-year pin that had just been given to me. That lasted all of 30 seconds. So I unpinned the Transformer shirt and put my hoodie on. At that point, Greg said he was going to put a more clear copy of the dress code up near the punch-in clock and in the break room. Remember when I said that he and I had different definitions of within reason? Yeah, apparently we're allowed to wear whatever we want as long as it's plain color or plaid and has no logos or graphics on it. So actually, as I write this, it's occurring to me that, as written, the FU shirts are in violation of the dress code. I guess I could start writing reports about everybody violating the dress code, but that would cross the line from harmless fun into needlessly petty. Maybe I'll just put up a post-it note on the dress code. So yeah, in conclusion, I exhausted all my options and had to wear the FU shirt right side out, tag in the back, with nothing covering it for the rest of the day, which by that point was less than an hour. From all indications, this will last as long as the promo will, about a month. Then we'll switch to normal plain clothes. It's a bummer that I won't get to wear my RWBY and Transformer shirts to work anymore, but honestly, I'd rather go plain and boring than the FU shirts, just out of principle at this point. OP did add a very quick edit on at the end, and it says, "For everyone saying I'm immature and petulant, yes, I am. And?" Well, OP, this is one way to turn your really good boss that you really enjoy working for into a bad boss. Because this guy's not your parent, okay? He doesn't have to put up with you. You're doing a little bit of malicious compliance, but you're also self-sabotaging yourself for the future. I mean, okay, the first time it might be funny, the second, okay, you got me again, whatever. But the third time and further on from that, what are you doing? Get back to work. I think it's just setting a precedent for immaturity, but I'd love to know what everybody else thinks. Please comment down below. This next story comes to us from Government Opening 254. Immediate cell phone prohibition while in uniform. Let's jump right in. While in the US military, I was an E4 enlisted, not an officer. Enlisted ranks go to E9. I was going to meet up with a friend for lunch, but this briefing ran long with an E9, female, who was someone special, like the leader of our entire career group or some such. But these briefings are mandatory and so generic that you tune them out. Probably the third one in a quarter I'd been forced to suffer in silence through. Ironically, this same female E9 had come to my prior base and I was coined by her. Coining is a small token of gratitude, a good job in the shape of a coin that you can show off to others, bragging rights. This visit was different. Because female E9 had blathered on, I wanted to alert my friend via text that I'd be late. It was so boring and the briefing kept getting extended for so long. I guess I practically had a conversation with said friend. Anyway, I caught the negative attention of my superiors. The next day, I got written up. In the reprimand, the letter stated, effective immediately, you are no longer allowed to carry your mobile phone. Cue malicious compliance. The moronic idiocy where the punishment far exceeded the crime led me to spending several taxpayer dollars writing an email outlining the issue with said order. It went something like this. To my E6 supervisor, I received my letter of reprimand stating that I was no longer allowed to have my phone with me while in uniform. Unfortunately, my phone is sitting here with me at my desk. How am I to get my phone to my vehicle given these circumstances? Please advise. The E6 shows up at my desk in a huff and says, take your phone to your car and get back up here. Aye aye. I then had to go visit my immediate E9, different one than the speaker. Why? Not sure. So it's me, E4, E6, and a male E9. I explained the situation, but I'm allegedly a problem child for not listening to a person who wouldn't be able to pick me out of a crowd the next day because I was informing a friend that I'd be late for lunch. Whatever. Male E9 asks me if I think he should call my parents and inform them of what I did. I think this is odd, but I guess some 18-year-olds get really nervous at this threat and plead, no, please no, E9, don't do that. Me? I'm 30 by this point, and a college graduate to boot. My response, you're gonna do whatever it is you're going to do, very matter-of-factly. This notably annoys male E9. What's your parents' number? I don't know. You don't know? Don't you call your parents? Well, yes, but they moved recently, and I just have their number stored in my phone. Well, pull it out and look it up in your phone. My gaze immediately shoots at E6, who just as swiftly lets out a very audible sigh as he realizes my phone is in my car. Sir, I was ordered to no longer have my phone on me while in uniform, I respond. I'm told to go retrieve it from my car and provide my parents' phone number to the E9 for, safekeeping. A year passes and I tell my dad the story after I've separated. He never got a call, but said that if he had, he would have asked whether the phone call was a joke, given that I was very much an adult by then. I think there were a couple of other ways you could have done malicious compliance on this one, although one of them might have gotten you arrested. Firstly, you could have just gone and gotten somebody else's phone, and when they said, "We told you not to use your phone while in uniform," you just tell them, well, it's not my phone. The other one was to, when they told you to go get your phone, leave the room, strip down naked, get your phone, and come back, and when they make a stink, say, well, you said no phone while wearing the uniform. This next story comes to us from Delayed Loading. You need me to have my ID? Sure, I can get that. Let's jump right in. I just bought a house with my spouse. Yay, great time to with this market, I know. And it's a new build. I'm going through setting up all the utilities and such so we can live comfortably. One of these utilities is internet, which has been giving me a headache for a few days now. There's only one option for the home since it's a new build, so unless I want to wait for someone else to lay their cables and such, I need to go through them. No biggie, they have fiber already along the street, and as I and my spouse work from home, fiber is a great option. The first 2 times I attempt to set up for a technician to come out and connect our house to the fiber line, I am met with arrival dates that change to 14 years from the day the technician was supposed to come. The first time I was confused and called in. I was told something was wrong with the account. Okay, I'll set up a new one and order a technician for the following day. Annoying, but doable. Next day, 14 years get added to the arrival date again. Call in again and get passed around technical support until I just ask for someone to tell me what is happening. Apparently, support can't tell me because it's on the technician side, and they can't see the technician side of things. Great. I decide to go in with my spouse to talk to people in store, since online and over the phone have only served to give me headaches. There, I am met with a simple issue before they can help me. I forgot my driver's license. Without my driver's license, they can't get into my account. I tell the associates helping me and my spouse that I have a picture of my ID on my phone and can just show it to them. They can't take that and ask me to call back after I go get my ID, handing me a specific associate's card with their number. Cue malicious compliance. My spouse and I leave, driving to a place to eat dinner, and call the associate in the car. We had told him it might take 20 minutes for me to get my ID. The restaurant we went to was about 2 minutes away. I led the call with my name and asked if he can get into my account now that I have my ID, and says he can. He comments that this was a lot faster than he thought it would be, and I just responded with a yep and read my ID number off of the picture I had of it in my phone. The call lasted about 30 minutes instead of the total 50 it would have taken if we had driven home to get my ID, and we went to eat dinner right after the call was done. Nothing has been fixed yet, but after all the issues I was having, this felt like a nice win. Hahaha. 14 years to get an install? That sounds like about the amount of time that I get quoted for a technician to come out anytime there's a problem with my internet. This one really did make me think though, because the person in the store who said to go home and get your ID and then call in must have not realized what they were actually asking OP to do. Either that or they were just following procedures and really didn't care. Another thing on this one is the one company monopoly on a whole area is absolute bullcrap. I understand OP was in a new area and other companies hadn't laid cable there yet, but I live in a house that was built in '87 and we only have one option here for internet that's faster than dial-up. This next story comes to us from KRLW890. Give a biography on this person who, by the way, doesn't exist. Let's jump right in. This happened long enough ago in college that I feel okay with sharing it now. A little while ago, I was taking this one ethics course that was required for my major, and it had the most insufferable professor. First of all, it was a college ethics course, so there's your first red flag right there. Secondly, it was only taught by one professor who used his own textbook for the course. For the first half of the semester, I thought he was a bit of a pain, but tolerable. It helped that my expectations were low. Then the midterm came up. It was an online course, so we were allowed and expected to use notes and the internet during the exam. I eventually got to this one question, which went something like this. According to name of person, quote by person, do you agree and why? Give a brief biography on the person. Having never heard of him before, I looked him up, getting exactly 3 relevant results. The first was just the question verbatim. The other 2 were questions on Q&A sites asking who this person was. One had no activity, the other had one answer. He doesn't exist. Well, he exists, just not by that name. If you're asking this question, you already know who he is. What the actual F? I would learn later that this person's name was literally an anagram of our professor's name, which is why I'm censoring that in addition to his real name. So I can only assume the question was both asked and answered by him in advance. But I didn't know that at the time. While this would have been a funny joke if it was framed as an extra credit bonus question, it wasn't. It was a serious, graded question on our midterm, with no indication whatsoever that the biography portion of the question wasn't serious. At a complete loss for words, I decided, fine, you want a biography for a person who doesn't exist? I'll give you one. After my actual serious response to the quote, I ended up writing this masterpiece of BS. Fake anagram name, born as Lucas Schmidt, which was a random name I made up, was born in the backwater alleys of Ursprung, Germany in 1954. Impoverished and orphaned by the age of 4, he was taken in by the German mafia for his pickpocketing skills. Raised to be merely a tool for the mafia, he scored his first kill by the age of 6. This would perhaps be the origin story of some sociopathic serial killer. But everything changed for young Schmidt in 1964 when he stumbled upon a copy of Dr. Seuss's Horton Hears a Who. Touched by its inspiring words, Schmidt had, for the first time, experienced actual human emotion. And now that he had a taste, he knew he could never go back. He fled from the German mafia and hid away in Switzerland, studying literature and philosophy. He began to write about our course's specific branch of ethics under the pen name Fake Anagram Name, so as to avoid recognition by the German mafia, with hopes of indirectly undermining them without drawing attention to himself. And while this story may seem fantastical, it is at least more interesting than he doesn't exist. This ended up being longer than the serious answer I gave on my response to the quote. My professor ended up giving me extra points for making him laugh, so at least he had a sense of humor. So what exactly are the ethics involved in including a trick question like that on a midterm? One that the grades actually count for. And I've got to be honest here because I never went to college myself, I don't really understand how this works. But if this professor is teaching you using a textbook that they wrote and they're profiting from that textbook, is that ethical as well? This next story comes to us from KCX. You want me to search for non-existent products? Got it. Let's jump right in. 3 years ago, I was working in a popular local cafe in the middle of a big city. Obviously, there were a lot of customers during rush hours, and of course, the usual Karens. At the time of this story, I was just finishing my training to be fully hired. The manager, Steve, was an utterly obnoxious person who was overall very disturbing. He'd tell us to do something, then change his mind while we were halfway through it. Anyways, he wasn't exactly competent, but we were low on staff and the owner desperately needed a manager. So this one day, I'm just clocking in and I see my first clients are a bunch of kids and their Karen of a mom. Yes, she had the haircut. The following conversation ensued. what are your muffin flavors? We have naming all the muffin flavors. Karen interrupted me. No, I'll just take one of those special edition muffins. Points to the back of the kitchen like she's expecting me to make them for her. Oh, sorry, those are limited edition muffins. We don't have them anymore. Karen rolled her eyes. Yeah, I know, just give me 5 of them. Me a bit louder, thinking she didn't hear me. We don't have those anymore, ma'am. I'm sorry. Just give me them. What's wrong with you? Give me your manager. Now, at this point, I'm pretty pissed because this woman is screaming at me at the top of her lungs and gathering all the attention towards her. So I do as she asked and get her the manager. Steve looks mad as soon as I disturb him. He goes to see the Karen and comes back to me. Just give her the muffins now. We don't have any of those muffins left. I already explained that to her. There are some left, just find them. Where are they? I'm pretty positive we don't have any left. I don't care about your opinion. Just find them already. Ask others to help you find them if you're that dumb. And don't go back to that lady or any other clients until you find those muffins. Me thinking about what he just said. Okay, sir, I'll give her the muffins. That's better. So I go and try to find them everywhere in the store. Of course, there is none left, as the muffins are seasonal items, and since none arrived in stock, there is no special edition muffins left. Cue malicious compliance. Since Steve told me to not go back to that lady or any other clients until I found the muffins, I do exactly that. Since he also told me to ask others for help, I make sure to let every employee know my desperate need for help in finding the muffins. In the end, since no one likes Steve anyways, we all went searching for the muffins. For several hours, clients kept pouring in until one of them dared to ask what we were all doing running around. I calmly explained that our manager sent us searching for something and we couldn't work until we found it. I insisted that our hands were tied and we couldn't serve them until our manager said so. Every single client went banging on Steve's door demanding to talk to him. As soon as he opened the door, everyone started yelling at him to let the employees serve them. Visibly confused by so many people in the cafe and in front of him, he shouted my name. I wasn't allowed to stop searching, so I replied by yelling back too. He eventually came in front of me and asked me what the F was going on. The following conversation was priceless. Oh, I was just searching for the muffins. Steve looked like he was about to pass out. What? Why? Well, you asked me to find them and to get help if needed. You insisted I shouldn't go serve anyone until I find them. Since we never found them, we never got to work again. Steve, realizing he just lost hours of profits. Seriously? Go back to work now. Me with a smug smile on my face. But we didn't find the muffins yet, sir. Would you like to search with us? Steve went ballistic on me, saying this was insubordination, that I had the IQ of a slug, etc. Meanwhile, the Karen sent multiple complaints to the owner about the manager. At the end of the day, the owner personally came in to announce to Steve he was fired and replaced by one of my coworkers. We never had any other seasonal muffins after that. Okay, does anybody else here think that Steve and Karen would make a wonderful couple? Because they're so much alike, they would get along. And come on, OP, just go into the back room and whip up a new batch of muffins. I mean, what do you even have a back room for? Come on. In all seriousness though, I'm glad your coworkers got in on it with you. That made things a little bit easier, and then the boss couldn't really just come down on you. They had to come down on everybody, which makes it a lot more difficult of a situation for the boss. This next story comes to us from Cinnamon Gin. Natural occurring colors. Let's jump right in. In the early 2000s, I worked at a Canadian casino. The place had so many ridiculous rules, including some very particular rules about makeup. The makeup rules were as follows. 1. No fake eyelashes. 2. No fake fingernails or fingernail extensions. 3. No makeup that is not a natural color. The natural color one confused me. What is deemed natural? Who decides what is and isn't natural? I asked my manager for clarification, but she couldn't give me any. Just keep it natural. Use natural occurring colors and you'll be fine. This did not sit well with me. Cue malicious compliance. My aunt has her master's in environmental science. I went to her house one evening and picked her brain about natural occurring colors. She informed me that, scientifically, naturally occurring colors are colors that can be found directly in nature. She even showed me a textbook that directly spoke about natural occurring colors. I borrowed the textbook and highlighted the paragraphs that specified this. Keep in mind, this was well before you could just Google something. The only way to back up the claim was to carry that 750-page textbook to work with me. My next shift, I went all out. Green eyeliner, eggplant-colored eyeshadow, yellow nail polish on one hand, and mango-colored on the other hand. I hit the floor to work, and within the first few minutes, I get hauled into my manager's office. OP, what do you think you're doing? You cannot wear those colors. You know our policy states natural occurring colors only when it comes to makeup. Head to the staff bathroom immediately and remove it. Wordlessly, I headed to the staff bathroom. But instead of taking the makeup off, I went to my locker, grabbed the textbook, and marched back to my manager's office. Excuse me, manager, I am wearing natural occurring colors. Here, look at this textbook that specifically states what natural occurring colors are by definition. I watched her face change as she read the book. First, she looked pissed, then worried, then finally resigned herself to what was happening. OP, do you really need to be that type of person? The type that follows the rules? I thought that's what you wanted me to do. She asked me to head back to the floor. For the remaining time I was employed there, I wore whatever color makeup I wanted. And so did almost all of my coworkers. They tried coming out with new rules, but could never get the wording right. F stupid rules, malicious compliance for the win. A while back now, I worked for a furniture leasing company, and the manager there had the biggest case of big fish in a little pond. One of the quote-unquote dress code rules that we had there was that you had to be clean shaven, and the boss would make sure that he checked that every time you came in, to the point where one day he put his hand on my face. In no uncertain terms, he was told to never do that again, and that he was lucky he wasn't lying on the ground. This next story comes to us from Family Money Time. You have to get this fixed. No, you will have to get it fixed. Let's jump right in. Okay, this is a secondhand story from a workmate. Happened in the 90s with a major oil and gas provider. We will call this Mob Company X. For the purpose of this story, my workmate will be called Jono. He worked for a contracting company which deals with servicing equipment for said Company X. Like many other industries, Company X contracted out a lot of the jobs to many service providers, many of which mobilized office staff to the major field facilities provided by Company X. Upon winning contracts from Company X, service providers either build office buildings in Company X's land or moved into existing buildings that belong to Company X. This is important to know for later. Back in the 90s, there was a massive push for job safety and industry-safe conditions and safe work conditions. With the push, new safety staff in Company X were hired with the mentality of changing the industry with an iron fist. It's our way or forfeit the terms in your contract and get the boot. When these safety guys came in, they started shaking up every nook and cranny. First service provider had their operations shut down for 2 weeks due to lack of operational guidelines. The second company was told their building was a fire hazard and their chemical storage was a mess. 3 weeks to get it fixed before the service provider could get back up and running. Fast forward to Jono and their provider. At this point, safety was on a roll, making the whole industry safe at the cost of the service provider's sanity and work hours, pretty much throwing their weight for everyone to catch. When it was their 2-week period for a safety audit, the safe auditor had developed a multiple item checklist that they found wrong with other service providers. During the whole 2-week audit, they were hit with pretty much everything wrong in a workplace, with the building, the chemical storage, and other menial items, so much so, the auditor brought in the safety head manager of Company X to talk to Jono and his manager with the sorry state of the workplace. They pretty much said if you don't get it all changed and fixed, you will lose the contract for unsafe work conditions. Jono was pretty much losing his crap at this point, didn't know where to start. But his manager took the list and read through it, then handed it back to the safety auditor. With a massive grin on his face, he said, "This is a Company X building. We rent off of Company X for the facilities and the workplace. Since you started your safety audit 6 months ago, I have been requesting to Company X upper management for an upgrade of facilities, but to no avail they pushed back. Now that we have to shut down due to unsafe workplace that Company X is unable to provide, we will have to stop servicing equipment that maintains the operation of over 500 gas wells, effectively shutting down over 50% of all gas production in this area." Note, Company X was and still is a major natural gas provider. If there was a potential risk of losing 50% of all gas production, of course, someone's going to get the boot. The safety manager was all deflated and didn't have anything to say. The auditor replied with, "We will have to come back and research what the conditions of the lease agreement in your contract is before we can continue." In the end, it took Company X 1 month to fix everything in Jono's workplace. They pretty much got away scot-free. There must have been a massive meeting or something, because all the auditors prioritized buildings that belonged to Company X and got their building fixed. I was so worried this was gonna go the way of them saying that, "Oh, okay, the building's fine then. Just keep working and everything will be okay." I was glad to hear that they still had to do things to get it fixed, and that it was under the dime of the bigger company, not the contractors. This next story comes to us from Who Skewed the Pooch? Forget everything about this place, a malicious compliance over a decade in the making. Let's jump right in. Many years ago, I worked for a little company. CEO was a miser of the first order. We needed image hosting for a large client account, and CEO was unwilling to pay for maybe $2,000 to $3,000 in annual image hosting fees at the time, even though the company made millions off the deal. Me being an enterprising individual, I figured out a way to host the images on Flickr. I saved the login information in a physical notebook and kept informing them that this is a house of cards and we really need to switch to a professional service. Several months later, I was promoted and asked for a raise to go with my promotion. CEO said no. All promotions and raises required CEO sign-off. I tried negotiating, but CEO said no, and to leave if I didn't like it. So I left. CEO told me to forget everything related to the job here, and he'd sue me if I did anything with the client accounts afterwards, sabotage or steal clients. I told him I'm leaving all my knowledge behind in the notebook in my final email to him, my manager, and BCC'd my personal email. In this email, a full inventory of what I left behind. Invoices, contracts, etc., including this entry. Personal notebook, account notes and reference material, including image hosting logins for such and such accounts, keep for reference. Recently, I received a professional networking site message from CEO, telling me to help them with my old accounts or he'll sue me. Apparently, Flickr changed their terms of service and the images were deleted. In over 10 years, nobody updated any documentation or the image hosting. Nobody bothered checking the email account either that was used to log into Flickr account. I told him that I cannot help. Per his request, I forgot everything I knew about his company, and anything I knew was in that notebook I left him over 10 years ago. Seriously though, I don't remember what I had for breakfast. Technical details from that long ago, I just laugh. OP added a quick edit on the bottom. It says, edited to add, thank you all for the awards and messages. I can't possibly respond to all of them, but I hope you all enjoyed the absurdity of it. Okay, come on, people don't work just to get a title, they work for compensation. If you're not getting a raise with your title, that's not a promotion, that's just a title change. And doesn't mean that I need to work any more than I did previously. OP, I think the one thing I would have done differently in this case is if they contacted me 10 years later thinking that I was responsible for something at that company that I haven't been at for over 10 years, I would have said, try and sue me. I'd love to see how it turns out. This next story comes to us from Uzo84. Given choice of new office, which was then ignored. Let's jump right in. The company I worked for was renting office space about 12 miles from where I live, which was really convenient, as it was 10.5 miles on the motorway. However, the decision had been made to stop renting that space, and the team of people working there would all have to work at smaller locations that the company owned. They had previously had a bad reputation for enforcing change without consulting those who would be affected, and they clearly wanted to change how staff felt. So we were asked to complete a form declaring which office we would prefer to move to. My first choice was another office 11 miles from my home and 10 miles on the motorway in the other direction. I would save about 5 minutes on my commute from my current posting. Not much, but I was appreciative of it. Also, I had to work from that office 1 to 2 times a week anyway, so it would save the company money on wages whilst just traveling. I wouldn't be able to claim any expenses for lunch, which is just about the only downside for me, but was happy with that. The company decided instead to post me to an office that, whilst only 5 miles from where I live, would require me to drive through suburbs to get there. It would nearly double my current commute time. They stated that whilst it was my official office, I could choose to work from my preferred office any time I liked. I explained that from when I moved, I would be keeping all my PPE at the office rather than in my own car. That on the days I had to work from my preferred office, I would have to go via my official office to collect my equipment and PPE, and they would have to pay for my travel, as I was no longer willing to use my personal car for business, as I would be driving even more miles. They didn't back down, and so now I am booking hire cars at the company's expense every week to transport me from my official office to my place of work. But there is nowhere secure for the hire car to be delivered at my office, so it's delivered to my home address at additional charge. I'm spending more time traveling and still claiming lunch expenses. I figure in 6 months' time, I'll show them the cost-benefit spreadsheet I've been keeping and suggest they move me. Oh, and the reason why I was not posted to my preferred office, there would be too many staff based there, though 2 of the 3 staff who were moved there have always worked remotely from home. I'm not quite understanding why they had you fill out a form to declare what office you wanted to work from when they weren't going to listen to that anyway. And besides, you already worked in that office, so somebody there should have known it would have been more cost effective to keep you at that office you already worked at twice a week. It just sounds to me like somebody wasn't doing their job properly because they didn't have the cost-benefit analysis done before deciding where people would go. This next story comes to us from The Milk Jug. We can only get 1 hotel room now? Okay, let's jump right in. Many years ago, I used to work for a company that did a lot of traveling. We're talking 12 to 20 hours a day in a truck with another guy, often for 5 to 10 days at a time. When we stopped at hotels, which was not every night, sometimes you slept in the truck, we would get separate hotel rooms so you would have a little bit of personal space. There was a per diem rate, and as long as we kept the hotel rooms under that rate, it was never an issue. Well, after about 15 years of this, the company suddenly decided that separate rooms was costing too much money. We had to share rooms now, regardless of the cost. The job market was fairly good at this point in time, and a few guys basically quit on the spot, and the rest complained a lot. Now, this actually created 2 forms of malicious compliance. The first one is, instead of looking for a moderately priced hotel, often the drivers would max out the accepted rate. For example, often we would drive out of major cities and stay in the suburbs, where hotels and motels are cheaper. Not anymore. You'd find the really nice hotel downtown, and you'd have to pay for parking down there too for the truck, so you'd expense that also. Then, some guys took the policy a step further and would walk into the hotel and say, "I'll give you the max rate for this room." They would chat up the hotel desk, explain the situation, and deliberately overpay for the room, spending every cent they could underneath the max rate, just to cost the company a bit more money. The second bit of malicious compliance took a bit more conniving behind the scenes. Shortly after this change was made, it just so happened that the head manager of the company needed to head out on one of these trips, which was a relative rarity. Through some backdoor dealings, a few of us managed to get the most obnoxious, smelliest driver on the schedule with him. This guy was a bit of a trip. Nice guy, but didn't like to shower very often, talk your ear off, and refused to turn on the radio, was really pretty slovenly, and liked to watch adult movies really loud on the TV in the hotel room. Wasn't the brightest bulb either, but was relatively competent at his job and easygoing otherwise. After sharing a hotel room with him for one night, the manager decided he needed his own hotel room. We made sure everyone in the company knew the manager could not even hack it for more than one day sharing a room, and this caused some pretty strong strife. A few more good guys quit. Shortly thereafter, they reinstated the policy of individual hotel rooms. But now, the damage had been done. Some of the guys really liked staying downtown. So the parking fees for the trucks went up, and the overall cost of the hotel rooms went up too. Okay, what did they really expect making a change that drastic after 15 years of it being the same policy? They had to know that there was going to be backlash. I guess they didn't think that their drivers were smart enough to pull off some malicious compliance. This next story comes to us from 12345 ABCD 1234. If it works after a restart, it's fixed. Let's jump right in. Story time. I worked for a $7 trillion company, one of the largest broker-dealers in the world. My laptop working remotely with a special login key would take 5 to 8 minutes to connect, log in, and load up everything. If I didn't wait the extra 2 minutes after logging in before clicking on stuff, it would just freeze up or not load. Sometimes it still wouldn't work, so I would restart, and that usually worked. One day, they updated software and changed a program and a restart wouldn't work. Did a second and a third. Call tech help, we went through everything I had tried already, which saves everyone time, but they had me restart 2 times more. That did work, so they said fixed. I said, okay, great. Next morning, same thing. Day after that, same thing. 5 restarts. So I called tech help and said, I'm restarting every morning 5 times before it works, and each restart takes about 3 to 5 minutes before it gets to the screen where I can connect and do everything else. They said there's nothing to fix since after the restarts it works. I told my boss and they said that works for now. We can try to get you a new laptop if it becomes a problem, and it's not a problem now because tech says it wasn't. Forward me the tickets for the tech issues. Each tech call tech has to open a ticket and put in all relevant info, including problem and solution. So I did, while summarizing our convo at the top, giving his instructions and tech help instructions and links and info for tech tickets below. So time-wise, the restart is 3 to 5 minutes and connecting is an additional 5 to 8 minutes, then restart again. So total 8 to 13 minutes times 5 restarts. Easily an hour or more just trying to start my day. And for my last 7 months there, I got paid an hour minimum a day for just trying to connect and do nothing. My boss knew it would happen, which is why he wanted to cover his butt himself and me. I still got my work done and was a high performer too. It put me in the middle high, which didn't affect anything, just meant less work for same money. Good times. I think the real problem in this story is the boss, because the IT techs are going to do what they're trained, and they're not going to do anything outside of regular protocol unless somebody higher up tells them to. And in this case, the management chain was telling them to just keep on working and do things the way they were, thus wasting time, wasting money, and making OP a whole lot less productive. This next story comes to us from Routine Molasses. Lock your ID away? As you wish. Let's jump right in. I'm a low runner at a supermarket that's known for not bagging your groceries for you. Due to reasons, I'm almost always on the till, so I'm experienced when it comes to the stupidity that is very common in my store's area. One thing I often do is offer customers a special trolley to help transport heavy or bulky items to and from their cars. These trolleys require the customer to temporarily hand over an ID card to the cashier as insurance, so they have to bring these relatively expensive trolleys back. Enter Karen. I don't even remember what she was buying, maybe an outside lounge or something of that ilk, but she was pissed that I'd be taking her driver's license for 10 minutes, as I do for all customers. I tried to assure her that it'd be on my person at this one register, waiting eagerly for her return from downstairs. Nope, not good enough. She demanded I lock it safely away inside the cash drawer. And that's when I realized I had a Reddit story on my hands. With a smile, I showed her as I placed her ID safely nestled among the cash bills in my personal password-protected till. You know, the one that is physically impossible to open mid-transaction. Oh, did I mention that each transaction at this time of day took about 5 minutes at least? Lo and behold, Madam Karen returns with the fabled trolley safe and sound. Unfortunately for her, I had just started a big sale when she came to me, palm extended and ready to receive her favorite plastic card. I took the time to pause my scanning, turn to her with full attention, and explain to her that she would have to wait until I finished serving my current customer, until she could get her precious pal back. Honestly, looking back, I'm not sure who was more pissed, Karen or the 12 people in my line who witnessed me stop doing my job just to reassure her that I was, in fact, doing my job as she specified. Regardless, Karen took note and let me finish the sale. I took extra care with this one to make sure no products fell over or got even the slightest bit wrinkled as I rung them up. Time consuming? Yes. But isn't a job well done worth it? So a few days ago, I went to Canadian Tire and bought a trampoline for my kids. I was told to go pay for my item and wait outside with my car right up by the front door and they would bring it out to me. Now out comes the scrawniest worker there they could possibly find, with my trampoline sitting on a cart. And lo and behold, they brought it right up to the back of my car, and all of a sudden, the cart started raising up to the same level as the back of my car. I was blown away, never seen something like this before, and I could understand that they wouldn't want those special carts going missing. So in this case, I can see taking their ID to make sure the cart comes back, or at least sending out an employee with the cart. I do have to say that in a case like this, I fully support the idea of making Karen wait as long as humanly possible when they've been a true Karen to you. This next story comes to us from Hinosaur. You don't want me to guess? Okay, you asked for it. Let's jump right in. Disclaimer, first time poster, not US resident. So this happened in the late 80s. I was 13 years old and got a weekend job at the local bakery. Nice job, and was paid around $13 an hour selling bread, cakes, handling the register, cleaning, etc. My boss was a creepy guy, and his ditto creepy wife also helped around. They were both the kind of people telling you to do A, not B, and then yelling at you for doing A instead of B. The bakery was quite famous for making 12 kinds of petite four cakes, all different flavors, so of course we sold a lot. The 12 different flavors had different design. One weekend, an older woman came in and wanted to buy some, asked for 12 cakes, 4 specific ones, and I put the cakes in a box. 2 hours later, she came back complaining that none of the cakes she bought were the flavor she wanted. I did not understand what happened and apologized. My boss and his wife heard my conversation with the customer and came in yelling at me, giving me the time of day in front of all the customers. I was useless, I had to know, and from now on, I had to be sure what was in the petite fours before selling any. It turned out that 2 days before my shift, a new baker had been hired. He made the petite fours, but not with the normal design for each flavor. I asked my boss if we could have small signs telling customers and me the different flavors. Bad move. And he and the wife yelled at me again, and the old woman felt sorry for me. 1 week later, the woman returned and wanted to buy petite fours again. I saw my boss and wife spying on my customer service. No signs for flavors, so malicious compliance coming up. I loudly greeted the customer. "Oh, you want 12 petite fours? You are lucky. We have 20 different ones today." Flavor and filling, you ask? Let's see. I'm not sure. Then I took each one of the petite fours and took a bite from them while loudly explaining, This is with coconut, this is with whiskey, this is with orange. The customer couldn't stop laughing and chose her 12 petite fours, paid, and left. I turned around and saw boss and wife completely shocked. I said, "You told me I had to be sure." Next shift, we had small signs for every petite four. Okay, I kinda had a little bit of a brain hiccup at the beginning of this story because OP said at 13 years old in the 80s, they were making $13 an hour. What? Now, I know OP said they weren't a US resident, but I really can't think of any other places that would have paid $13 an hour for a mom and pop bakery shop in the 80s. Anybody help me out here? I'd love to know where this is. Comment down below. This next story comes to us from Jedi Bo Jedi Prime. You think this is slow? I'll show you slow. Let's jump right in. Okay, so this one still makes me laugh every once in a while. A few years ago, by the way. Sometimes after my shifts, I walk down to a local grocery store to grab some snacks or lunches for the rest of the week. This particular day, I had effed up my knee badly, mainly because I tripped on ice. Canadian winters. I'm visibly in pain and visibly limping. I have one thing in mind: get in, get out, get the bus, and play Halo till 3 a.m. That's all I want. Karen, though, she wanted the Flash. Now, here's a note about me. Not only am I big in height, but also in size. It's a bit of a sore spot because even though I've learned to love myself, when it's picked on by strangers, it pisses me the F off. Fun fact, trying to disregard what people think about you is hard. Anyways, I'm limping in and going semi-slow as I'm wearing boots, trudging through deep snow and carrying my heavy butt bag. This speed demon in a white BMW whips through the parking lot after being stuck behind the grocery store delivery truck, almost hitting me. I was close to other cars, so she almost hit them too, and kicking up snow that barely missed me. I let out a loud "what the F?" and then finished my lot walk and entered the store when this crazy lady had teleported into the store. Now she's behind me, and without knowing she was the driver, I went to open this security gate thing to be polite. And then it begins. Begin to hold open the gate. Move it, fat butt. Christ, so slow. Can you move any slower? Urgh. I was, of course, upset with the lady. I saw my buddy and he was like, "Whoa, you okay?" And I said I was fine and then moved on. I got my stuff and began to walk out when the universe gifted me some revenge. She was right behind me again. Now, funny thing about this store, there are 3 doors in the lobby. The outside, inside door, the entrance with the gate, and then the exit. Just like the entrance, the exit is a bit of a squeeze. Ha! Slow, eh? I'll show you slow. I had to. My knee was killing me. Karen is going ape crap. She can't go around me as they have cleaning carts for the night on the right. To the left side would mean squeezing by me, and she obviously wasn't going to do that, having to almost touch the fat guy. Oh no, we can't do that, let alone just say, "Excuse me." Nah, too hard. She ran to the entrance door. Take it, it's not a far walk out, I was just taking my time. She whips the gate open, but due to security, the entrance door doesn't open from the other side, only to enter. Is that a safety violation? Probably. But watching Speed Demon try everything to get the door open was priceless. And then in the lobby, I did it. I walked my speed before, which was a faster slow to her horror. She calls out, "What the hell?" And I said, "Well, you asked me if I could go slower than slow. I was just filling your request." Her face was priceless. Her comments and bullying did dick to help her. She eventually just went around the other side because I was leaving the lot. She pulled out fast, running a red and almost hitting another car. Now, you're probably thinking, what the F was she buying? And I don't know. All I do know is it must have been candy because she was in the aisle with me. 6 feet apart before COVID, by the way. Guess my fat was infectious. The only thing I'm surprised with is how her car is still intact as she drove faster than Lightning McQueen in deep snow and ice. maybe next time just say, "Excuse me." I would have been happy to move out of the way, no problemo. Also, side note, it was just us in the store. The store was dead, so I knew it was her BMW. Also, because in this plaza, all other stores close around 9 and this was closer to 10. Now, at the end of the story, OP added on an edit, and I can't read it to you because OP went on a rant about BMW drivers, and it is hilarious. If you want to read it, there is a link to this story in the comment section down below. I do recommend going to check it out because it is kind of funny. One of the best things you can do in a situation where somebody doesn't think you're moving fast enough is look them in the eyes and say, "I have 2 speeds. If you don't like this one, you're really not going to like the other one." This next story comes to us from Toll House Frank. Follow the dress code to the fullest extent. Let's jump right in. Howdy folks, this one took place closing in on 6 years ago. The bosses at the time were usually very cool and easy to get along with. However, some Karen got into HR and insisted on changing the work culture to suit her desires and vision. She rewrote the dress code, and overnight, instead of being allowed to show up dressed comfortably, as long as it wasn't dirty, smelly, or full of holes, tech support center, we suddenly had to dress business professional. She even specified the materials the clothing could be made out of. She tried firing almost everyone there for violating dress code before a manager, one I still love to this day, told her to calm herself. Because she had not only not published the dress code, it hadn't been approved by management. HR Karen gets her memories in a knot and pulls strings to get it approved in a couple of days. So in a couple of days, I was reading through the dress code, trying to see what I could do to make her regret it. The dress code word for word: clothing is to be made of woolen materials only, unless a specific exception is made below. Allowable clothing is listed as business suits, button-up dress shirts, monocolor ties, leather shoes, skirts, and blouses. If wearing a skirt or blouse, silk materials are accepted. Of note, the silk exception was put in solely for her, as she claimed that wool gave her hives. Anyway, the air conditioning had been out for weeks, and we had been getting by in the building with big fans and wearing light shorts and shirts. It was a hot summer. So I searched for a loophole in the new dress code. I'm sure you can already see what loophole I found and exploited. Note, despite having lost a lot of weight since then, I am still a hefty, very hairy man. 200 plus pounds lost since then, with a very long beard. So day 1 of the new dress code, on the way to work, I stopped in at a local Goodwill. I bought the most garish skirt I could find that I could squeeze in, and the most feminine blouse I could find. I paid for them and got dressed at a gas station just down the street from the work location. I waltzed into work with lots of stares coming my way. However, I was the only man on the floor not sitting in a pool of my own sweat. Skirts are surprisingly breezy, and blouses are like nothing there at all. Less than 30 minutes in, everyone in the building can hear HR Karen screaming at and about me as she runs up to my desk and demands I go to her office for disciplinary action. I tell her I cannot do that, as company policy states that disciplinary action can only be undertaken by the employee's team lead and site manager, not HR. She then screams at both of them to force me into her office. They both give me the stink eye, but I give them a thumbs up and a big grin and say, "Please, please, please, make me go into her air-conditioned office." Did I also mention she had the only working air conditioner on site? So the 4 of us trudged to her office with me grinning ear to ear, myself and many coworkers laughing as this large, hairy, heavily bearded man in a silk skirt and blouse walks past everyone. All because I and they know how ridiculous I look, and how they know I only pulled stunts at work like this when I am 100% in the right. So we get to HR Karen's office and I sit down. She tells me I am going to be fired for insubordination and breaking dress code. I laugh in her face and tell her terminations can only be processed upon agreement by the team lead of the employee, site management, and HR. You are the one who insisted upon and wrote that rule. unless they both agree you're lying and can shut up. She was screaming at the top of her lungs at this point. She said it was harassment against all the women in the office for a fat, hairy man to be in women's clothing. Oh, can you point out the dress code where only women are allowed to wear skirts and blouses? As soon as I said that, my team lead suddenly lit up and started giggling as she knew where I was taking this. Karen got out a written copy of the dress code and then started sputtering and stammering as she read it word for word as I typed it up above. Gender was not mentioned, only material and types of clothing allowed. As she started screaming at me again for being inappropriate, the site manager looked at her and said, "Do you really want to get fired for sexual discrimination and sexual harassment? He has you caught in a ringer over a barrel of fire, and it would cost us potentially millions." Strangely enough, the dress code was rescinded before the end of the day, and we were allowed to go back to the way we had been dressing. As an extra, she is no longer with the company and has been gone for years. She made blunder after blunder, usually screaming at me and my bosses, but I always pointed her at the policies she made and got approved, as I was following them to the letter. I'm actually really amazed that she was able to get that dress code approved by the higher-ups after trying to make the change with absolutely no approvals previously. Kinda makes you wonder if the HR person had something over one of the managers. You never know. This next story comes to us from I Am a Simp for Obi-Wan. The city wanted me to take better care of my gardens, so I had them approved by the local Nature Conservation Association. Let's jump right in. The guys at Pro Revenge argued that it better belongs here, so here I am. My house is surrounded by two gardens, one in the front facing the street and one in the back bordering my neighbor's gardens. When my parents and grandparents moved into our house 26 years ago, they planted a thick hedge around the entire property. They also installed a rose arch over the pathway to our front door, and my grandfather was always busy keeping up the garden, planting, weeding, keeping everything very tidy. My grandfather died in 2002, and after that, the garden was neglected for a few years as my parents were still working and my brother and I were in university and school. But then, around 2005, my mom read something that we should plant stuff to help the bees, and she took over the gardens, planting lilac, rhododendron, roses, and various berries. Later, we decided to also install raised garden beds with various kitchen herbs. My mom is now over 70 years old and has officially given the house over to my brother and me, so that we won't be taxed on inheriting it when she dies. Since then, I've been sporadically taking care of the gardens. I like them in their wild shape with all the birds, bees, bumblebees, and butterflies flying around. In autumn we get hedgehogs, and we've been visited by a fox recently, which sends my cats into a panic. Then, recently, we received a letter from the city stating that our garden was interfering with the safety of the street, because the hedge was overgrowing the pavement and contained poisonous berries which were a danger to children. Now, my brother trims the hedge every month to make sure nothing is overgrowing the pavement in any way. And while the berries are poisonous, to get to them, you'd have to be quite resilient because they're surrounded by thorns. They are also known to be ideal food for some local birds. So I contacted our local Nature Conservation Association and asked them if they would like to have a look at our gardens and maybe tell us if we could improve anything to make them even more nature friendly. They came, looked around, and then told us they rarely see gardens so in touch with nature. They approved our gardens as especially nature friendly and contacted the city to tell them that from their point of view, any changes would be considered unfriendly to nature. And since our city prides itself with once being one of the green capitals in our country, they had to budge. Don't mess with my gardens. See, OP, I completely agree with you for being at one with nature. I mean, that's what my house looks like. That's exactly why there's a whole bunch of weeds all over my yard. Right? What must have happened in this case, though, is that one of the neighbors probably called in and complained, because if you were actually keeping those hedges back from the public walkways, then the city really wouldn't have had a problem with it unless somebody else had a problem with it. The same thing happened on my street a couple of years ago in the winter. I forgot to park my truck in the driveway, and I woke up to a $110 ticket for leaving my truck on the street overnight. Now, there were other cars that were on the street overnight as well, and none of them had tickets. So somebody must have called that in. Honestly, sometimes we get neighbors that we just can't win with, and unfortunately, we have to do basically what they want. But two can play that game because if you know what neighbor it is, any blatant violations that they have, you make sure you call them in too. This next story comes to us from Voyager 7. Whatever you usually wear, let's jump right in. This happened a long time ago in a friend group of mine. Julia, 27 female at the time of the incident, was having a garden party. Julia was basically a good person, but stressed out over tiny details easily. And when she was throwing a party, she could sometimes get a little, well, whatever the equivalent of bridezilla is if it's not actually a wedding. In this case, she was driving all of us girls nuts with her vision for her party, which included each of us in a different color, coordinated pastel dress so that we'd make a collective rainbow, and similar antics. Enter Mickey, 24 male. Mickey was and still is Julia's best friend. He definitely had a streak of mischief to him, and he was also the only one who could usually make Julia see how ridiculous she was being when she got like this. We asked him to talk to her about it, but he didn't get anywhere this time. Julia just said tiredly, "Please let me have this. I've been working on it for months." Eventually, we ended up agreeing to wear what she wanted us to wear so long as she paid for the dresses, which to her credit, she did. Meantime though, Mickey asked her what he was supposed to wear. Now, Julia's vision didn't really include specific plans for how the guys were going to dress. She just wanted them in suits or the like. So when Mickey asked her that in the middle of a harried moment, she blurted, "I don't care, just wear whatever you'd normally wear to an outdoor party." Cue malicious compliance, or at least mischievous compliance, since I don't think there was serious malice involved. See, Mickey worked at a Ren fair. When he went to outdoor parties, which he did several times every summer, he attended as part of the staff, and he had a very specific costume he was supposed to wear. And so, on the day of the party, he shows up early, along with most of the rest of us, to help Julia set up, and he's wearing a full Ren Fair jester's costume, complete with cap and bells. To Julia's credit, her first reaction was to laugh her head off, her second was to swat him. Mickey did set up in the jester's outfit and then finally admitted, just before the party, that he had a different outfit in his bag if she'd like him to change. He hadn't intended to really mess up her party, only to break her brain a little before it started. Julia eventually did tell him it would be nice if he'd go change, but she had to think about it. She admitted she was starting to think it might be worth it just to see how everybody else reacted to this perfectly set up garden party with a pseudo-medieval jester wandering around. You know, if a lot of Julia's parties were like this, they might not have been all that enjoyable for a lot of people that went to them, and they might have just been going because, well, you're a friend, and if I don't show up, that's not a good thing. That jester routine probably would have brought a lot more fun into that party, and it probably would have been the talk of the town too. This next story comes to us from More Than From No Fall. Sure, I'll take your pennies. Let's jump right in. I was working at a gas station about 20 years ago. One evening, this lady comes in, dumps like 5 or 6 handfuls of pennies on the counter, and states her preferred brand. Ordinarily, our cashiers would just tell someone to F off if they were trying this, but I was pretty chill at the time, and I had nothing to do but run the register and stuff my face with food from the deli case. So, cue malicious compliance. I just said, "Okay, but I'll have to take other customers. I'll count this between." She objects. "It's all there. I counted it already." I reply, "If my drawer comes up wrong, I'll get in trouble. I have to count it. Sorry." She starts stomping around the store all mad, throwing her arms around, etc. I would later come to recognize this as tweaker behavior, and I start counting, meticulously setting the pennies aside in stacks of 10, and pausing every time a customer comes in. All the while, this lady is acting like she's been stabbed through the hand. Maybe half a dozen customers, and 10 minutes later, I'm nearing the end of the pile. She's still standing by the door, getting more and more impatient, being at everyone who comes through. I was giving the other customers priority, so they didn't care, of course. Anyway, I finished counting and she's short, maybe 15 cents? Who could remember? It was fairly common for people to raid the penny dish to cover the cost of a pack of cigarettes they couldn't quite afford. And this was generally allowed. Small town, and after all, who even cares? But she promised me it was all there, and I got a bit of a bug up my butt about it. So I take the overflowing free penny dish and move it behind the counter before calling her over. "You're 15 cents short. Can't I just cover it from the dish? Where is it?" "What dish?" "There's a dish. There's always a dish. You took it away." I give her a puzzled look, wave my hands over the counter. "There's no dish. I don't know what you're talking about." She is incensed and cusses me out for a while. I just shrugged it off. She left without her cigarettes, of course. My boss came over afterward and told me I didn't have to count those or even take them. Dude did not get mad at all, but I just played it straight and was like, oh, okay. Now, I've mentioned before that wifey and I used to run a convenience store, and cigarettes were the one thing that people would bring in all kinds of different things to pay for. We're talking silver mint sets, we're talking silver dollars, we're talking money from way back in the 60s. There were all kinds of things that came into the store. Now, that worked out for me though, because I was a coin and bill collector, and I collected a lot of things in that store from these people. I've never really understood this thing of bringing a bunch of coins in as a way to get back at somebody in a store, because any one of these stores is going to make you sit there while they count them all out. They're being paid by the hour to be there, you're not, so who's winning in that case? This next story comes to us from Novel Command 8445, a fiasco with pancakes. Let's jump right in. This happened at a restaurant a few years ago. We'll just call it Bracker Carol, or BC for short. So on a busy Sunday afternoon, the church crowd was slowly winding down, and we were nearing our dinner rush. This particular restaurant, you can order breakfast all day. At around 3 p.m., two ladies were seated in my section, and I greeted them promptly. Both ordered drinks, their food as well, at the same time. Guest 1 ordered Mama's pancake breakfast with scrambled eggs and cheese with extra crispy bacon. Guest 2 ordered the Grandma's sampler with scrambled eggs and cheese with extra crispy sausage, bacon, and ham. I put their order in exactly as they ordered and told the cooks how they said they wanted to see no pink anywhere. Cooks made the food, I expedite and bring out their meal. Everything looks the way they ordered it: charcoal bacon, sausage, and ham. I set the food down and they immediately start running me. Never once did they ask for everything at the same time, even after I asked, "Is there anything else I can get for you?" Every time I brought back something like hot sauce, ketchup, or napkins, they always needed something else. After 5 minutes of back and forth, they said everything was fine and I went and did other duties. They hadn't touched their food until I had everything for them they had me run around for. A few minutes later, my manager on duty comes to me and asks about table 231, guest 1 and 2. He says they're complaining their eggs are cold and their food is burned. I explained they said everything looked fine and their eggs wouldn't have been cold if they had asked me for extra napkins, hot sauce, ketchup, and extra butter and jelly on one trip instead of 6. He goes back and forth with them, and they are adamant they are not paying for the eggs or bacon, and are only paying for the pancakes. Cue malicious compliance. The Grandma's sampler comes with 2 pancakes, a sampler of meats, eggs, and a side of your choice for $9.99. 2 a la carte pancakes are $7.99, so $2 off, for all of you math geniuses out there. Mama's pancake breakfast comes with 3 pancakes, eggs, and your choice of meats for $7.99. 3 a la carte pancakes are $9.99, which is obviously $2 more than the breakfast. Manager on duty hands the receipts to each lady and both stop him before he can walk away. Guest 2 is squawking she's paying $2 less than what her breakfast would have cost, and she felt that wasn't a good enough discount. Guest 1 is squawking because her meal is now more than what it was before. The only thing my boss kept saying to both of them was, "You asked to only pay for the pancakes, and that is what I charged you for," and then he walked away. They paid up front, squawking the entire time at the cash register, making a scene. threatened to call corporate, and said they will be returning to speak to someone higher than my manager on duty. Manager on duty and I went into the back and kept laughing. You don't get many wins in the service industry, but this one will always be a memorable one. I'm guessing these people were serial complainers and they were used to getting severe discounts on their breakfast and honestly whatever other meals they were getting because they would complain about something every single time. OP, you did exactly what they asked in the first place, so they got exactly what they deserved. This next story comes to us from Screenaholic. Wait until somebody shows? Roger Sargent. Let's jump right in. This happened around 2018, give or take a year. I was in my mid-20s in the US Army Infantry, and my rank was Specialist, one above Private First Class. Same pay as Corporal, but none of the responsibility. I was stationed on Schofield Barracks in Hawaii, which is a pretty small post. Now, for those of you not familiar with Army life, we do have a day-to-day job. We have to do daily physical training every morning with our platoons, then go eat breakfast and shower before being back by 9 a.m. in uniform to do whatever menial task leadership tells us to that day. Occasionally, you get pulled away from the company for work details that higher levels of organization need done. For example, battalion needs X done and needs Y soldiers to do it, so battalion tells each company to send Z soldiers, and each company tells each platoon to send N soldiers. Details can last from an hour to over a month, and usually involve cleaning or organizing something. The thing is, sometimes details get lost in this game of telephone. So one day my squad leader tells me I'm getting put on a detail for the next 2 weeks. I'll do PT with the platoon, but then at 9, I'll report to this address and do whatever they need done. He vaguely says it's something about a warehouse, but he doesn't know what I'll be doing. Roger Sergeant, not a problem. So next Monday after PT, I get dressed, put on my uniform, and head to the address. It's not a 5-minute drive from my house. I'm married, so I'm out of the barracks. I show up a few minutes early like a good soldier and see it's a bunch of warehouses in a chain link fence with a locked gate, with no one else around. No problem, chill in my car until someone arrives. 9:15 rolls around and no one shows. I text my squad leader to double check the time and address. He says yes, you're at the right place and time, wait until someone arrives. Roger Sergeant. 1100, I'm still just screwing around on my phone in my car, no one in sight. Text Sergeant again, tell him no one has shown up. He tells me to be back after lunch, someone will come. Roger Sergeant. 1300 hours, come back after having lunch with my wife, still no one. Wait 30 minutes and text him again. Sergeant says that I'm supposed to be there for 2 weeks, someone will show up, just wait. Roger Sergeant, I'll stop bothering you. So I wait another hour and a half, and then the highest ranking person there, me, dismisses the detail, also me, for the day. Sergeant seemed sure that's where I'm supposed to be, so that's where I went for the next 2 weeks. I stopped bothering him and just showed up at the warehouse every day at 9. Every day I took my lunches earlier and longer, and every day I let myself go home sooner. By the end, I think I spent less than 2 hours a day at the detail. But Sergeant told me to show up, and that's what I did. About a month later, I get put on another detail, and by another detail, I mean the one I was supposed to be on to begin with. I spent 2 weeks with like 10 other soldiers, cleaning out the battalion's spare storage warehouse. My guess is, either my squad leader was given the wrong date, or the detail was pushed back a month from the original date, and my SL didn't get the memo. No one ever seemed to question why I was needed for the detail I already did. So this is what we refer to as a snafu. Situation normal, all effed up. It sounds to me like what OP really got out of this was a 2-week working vacation. I mean, they only had to do 2 hours a day. That's not bad at all. We have so many military stories here, it kind of makes you wonder how the military even functions properly when we hear all of the bad sides of it on these subreddits. This next story comes to us from Camos Darkfly. That's not how the world works. Let's jump right in. So this happened more than 14 years ago, but I don't remember exactly how long ago. It involves myself and a Canadian-American office supply chain store that almost rhymes with maple syrup. A little bit of backstory is necessary before we get to the meat though. It's lengthy, so I hope you don't mind. Way back when, in the stone age of my IT career, I was hired as a floor associate for this office supply store. It wasn't the position I'd applied for, but that'll change later. I applied for a position as an in-store computer tech. It wasn't long before my aptitude for the internal workings of computers became apparent. And one day, the store manager asked me into the tech office to help deal with the massive backlog of computers in for service that the actual tech, who only worked a few hours a week, couldn't handle. I went through these tickets in relatively short order, turning the machines around and clearing the bench, so to speak. At this point, the store decided to make me the full-time tech. That was fine by me. That's what I wanted in the first place. Unfortunately, when you let computers languish as long as this store had and never do any marketing, the business doesn't come in very fast. I'd already moved to have some aggressive in-store marketing done by floor associates, along with enforcing certain company policies that were lax before, and things started to slowly turn around. Not fast enough for the store though, who cut my hours back to 3 days a week. I applied for and worked other jobs to make up the difference. Over the next several months, I gradually built the store's tech services up from being bottom of the barrel to one of the top grossing stores in the region, edging out larger and more well-established stores. We had a reputation for fast and efficient service, along with saving the customer time and money by handling anything that didn't require the warranty department in store. This further increased our store profits, and it wasn't long before the district management took notice and gave recognition to me personally. Of course, all this effort comes at a cost, and it wasn't long before my day was full, from beginning to end. I was still working the other part-time job, which offered higher pay, but fewer hours, so it balanced out to being equal to the store job on fewer days. So I couldn't add more days to my store schedule without sacrificing my weekend, something I was unwilling to do. I started working extra hours, usually clocking in a shift anywhere from 10 to 14 hours. Business continued to explode, and it wasn't long before I was working lunches at my workbench too. Throughout all this, the store never bothered to hire a second tech. I didn't mind, I got paid, and it averaged out to a full 5-day job, and it was pennies compared to the money I was directly making the store. Here's where the malicious compliance comes in. After about 6 months of this, the department manager came to me and stated that they could no longer afford to pay me overtime, despite tech work sales being higher than the store had ever seen, and my pay still being less than or equal to what they'd have to pay me to work full-time for them. They didn't even offer to put me back to full-time and or raise my pay, just told me to clock out at my scheduled time. So I did. I clocked out and went home right when I was scheduled. Computer on the bench? It got left until my next workday. Ticket not updated? Maybe the notes are on my desk and I clocked out before entering them into the system. I was always gone by my scheduled time, not a minute later. I also stopped working on my lunch break. Work times on the bench went through the roof, and it wasn't long before management started getting complaints from floor associates who had to deal with angry customers not having their computers within a respectable length of time. One even called head office to complain after their computer was sitting with no news for 2 weeks. It was only 3 weeks and a huge disaster later that they finally relented and said I could work as long as I wanted. It didn't last, and a few months later, I transferred stores before quitting for greener fields entirely. I still drive by that store and wonder how well they're doing without me, and it's been 11 years. Okay, so this is obviously a staple store, and I'm still having trouble wondering why OP said maple syrup for the rhyming part, because the syrup part doesn't rhyme with anything in Staples. Good work, OP. I know from experience working for that particular store that one hand generally doesn't know what the other one's doing, and they definitely don't like paying out overtime hours at all. OP was lucky to move on to greener pastures, and judging by the comments down below this one, they have absolutely no more ties to retail tech support. This next story comes to us from Janelle. Insurance companies absolutely make no sense. Let's jump right in. Here's a bit of malicious compliance for you regarding insurance. My son has severe cerebral palsy. He is predominantly wheelchair bound unless we put him into his stander. This is a device that we can strap him into and tilt it up into a position that has him standing instead of sitting. We use that piece of equipment with him every day for at least an hour, sometimes twice a day. It's a vital part of his daily activities. Well, because we use that stander so much, the safety belt and harness have both worn out. I put in a request to our medical equipment vendor to order us a new set of belts and harness so he can continue using his stander. This should have been no problem, as it's just a replacement part for existing equipment that our insurance has previously bought. The vendor did that, but I got a letter from insurance denying the claim. I called Aetna to find out what was going on. The person who took the call said that they will no longer pay for replacement parts. For the record, the hip belt is $252 and the chest harness is $175, a mere $427 replacement order for them versus several thousands if I were to order a whole new stander. I spent an hour arguing with her about how the safety equipment is worn out and it's not safe to use it without them because he would simply fall out of it. That it is vital to its use to have those items. She suggested I pay for them out of pocket, and again, she reiterated that the policy no longer covers replacement parts for equipment. A light bulb finally flipped on in my head. I asked if I were to order a whole new stander, will my policy cover it? She said yes, so that's exactly what I've done. I emailed via my chart to my son's PMR doctor requesting the prescription for a new stander to be sent to the vendor. At the vendor appointment, we got squeezed in 2 weeks later. I told them what all happened on the phone call with Aetna. Both the therapist and the vendor's rep at the appointment busted out laughing. My son now has a pending order for a brand new Lecky stander with a motorized hydraulic lifting system, new activity tray, and all the safety harnesses and belts, including extra thigh supports, for an approximate total of $5,900 for all these bells and whistles. 3 days ago, I got a call from the equipment vendor telling me that the order has been approved and the equipment is being ordered from the manufacturer. I expect to have it delivered in a few more weeks depending on logistics. Thanks, Aetna. I only wanted a $252 hip belt and $175 chest harness, but we will gladly use a whole new stander that Aetna has to pay at 100% because our yearly deductible has been met due to his medical condition. So Aetna has to pay almost $6,000 instead of $425. I plan on donating the other stander, which is only 4.5 years old, to Shriners Hospital. Hopefully one of their patients can benefit from it. In this case, it sounds like OP and the hospital they donated the old equipment to both came out on top. OP got their brand new equipment, which will help increase the quality of their son's life, and the hospital got the older equipment that I'm sure they'll have no problem ordering the replacement parts for. OP, way to stick it to the insurance company. I mean, if their policies are that bad, then they had it coming. This next story comes to us from Mallory454, truck driving on a salary. Let's jump right in. This one is from decades ago, otherwise it would get me in deep doo-doo. I worked as a truck driver in the mid-90s. The company I worked for, can't name them here, but their favorite color is orange, decided to try out a new pay package. The details were complex, but it basically replaced the standard pay per mile with a set weekly salary, and not a good one. The new package was instituted on a small-scale trial. The company quickly realized that they could make a lot of money if they didn't have to pay their drivers, and the package became the company standard. Because of the complexity of the package, please don't ask, it took the drivers a few weeks to figure out we were getting screwed. Then we started fighting back. A couple of things you need to understand about a truck driver's work week. There are 4 lines on a DOT, Department of Transportation logbook. Lines 3 and 4 constitute the hours we can work daily and weekly. 10 hours, now 11, driving per day, 70 hours driving and other duties, line 4, per 7-day week. In order to maximize our income, we put as little time as possible on line 4, for which we normally did not get paid, and logged the maximum legal speed on line 3, driving, even if we couldn't actually drive that speed due to weather, traffic, terrain, etc. While this was of course illegal and impossible with current electronic logs, it wasn't a secret. As long as your logbook was neat and showed you driving at or under the speed limit, the DOT inspectors wouldn't give you a hard time about it. They had more than enough work with the drivers who were wildly abusing the rules. Once we were put on a salary, weekly earnings drop of about 33%, we had no incentive to cheat. Examples: a run from Portland, Oregon to San Francisco, California is 635 miles. You could log this as one day at 550 miles, 55 miles per hour times 10 hours, leaving you 85 miles. 85 divided by 55 equals 1.75 hours logged the next day. That would leave you 8.25 hours to drive on day 2 after your delivery. Of course, the reality was quite different. There are some 300 miles of mountains along the route. With 45,000 pound load, you only averaged about 35 miles per hour through them. And anyone who has lived in the San Francisco Bay Area can tell you how likely you are to be able to drive 55 miles per hour at 8 a.m. Under the new pay package, we logged it as it actually happened. The result being that I would arrive in San Francisco in time to make my morning delivery and be out of hours to run for the rest of the day, for which I had to be paid. Not only did the company have to pay me to sit for the day, they had usually booked a load for me that day. It took a while for the load planners to catch on. That either had to be covered by another driver or lost entirely. Now, all those things we had glossed over in order to keep moving got tossed into the company gears. You lost 3 hours throwing chains and driving across Mountain Pass at 25 miles per hour, and now you can't make a Friday delivery. So sorry, no more hours to drive. And the receiver isn't open on weekends? Not my problem. Cargo receivers didn't care much for it either. A lot of them would use the threat of not being unloaded in a timely manner to force drivers into abusive situations. I can remember with great fondness telling a number of them that I didn't care if they ever unloaded me. I got paid the same either way. That got back to the company, but as long as I was complying with DOT rules, there was nothing anyone could do about it. Also removed one of the big hammers the company would use to threaten the drivers. That is a reduction in miles dispatched. Fleet managers sure didn't like that aspect of the pay package. All this occurred 6 months before my 3-year anniversary with the company. At the 3-year point, my 401k vested and I got my last 2 weeks of vacation pay. I figured during that 6 months, I just about broke even on what I lost in wages. The salary pay package lasted about a year before all the problems it caused forced the company to return to pay per mile. Writing this story out has reminded me of all the other things this company did while I worked there. I will save those for future posts. This is the true definition of malicious compliance. The company changes the rules, and you follow the rules exactly as they've told you to, regardless of the consequences for the company. This story is a clear indication that the people in management for this company have never actually driven a truck themselves. They have no idea what it's like to actually be in a truck out on the road, and thus there's no way they can effectively manage their drivers. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.